I'm Hazel, 32, and that Sunday at my in-laws' house changed everything. I walked in as my 7-year-old daughter Emma sat on the floor, holding her arm, tears streaming down her face. My heart stopped. "He's a boy," my mother-in-law Margaret said dismissively. She must have said something to provoke him. They actually made my little girl apologize to her cousin Jacob, who had just hit her. I smiled, though fury burned inside me. I picked Emma up, and we walked out without a word. 2 days later, they got a wake-up call they never expected. Before I continue the story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for your child. To understand why that moment was the breaking point, you need to know about our family dynamics. I met my husband Robert 9 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. It was one of those movie-worthy moments. He spilled his drink on my dress, apologized profusely, and then spent the entire evening making me laugh. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a beautiful summer ceremony. Robert is kind, hardworking, and a wonderful father to Emma, but he has one significant blind spot: his parents. Margaret and William have always been overly involved in our lives. They're the type of in-laws who never quite accepted that their son had formed his own family unit. At first, I tried to embrace their involvement. I thought having attentive grandparents would be beneficial for our future children. I couldn't have been more wrong. Robert has one brother, Thomas, who's 3 years older and married to Beth. They have an 8-year-old son, Jacob. From the beginning, it was clear that Thomas was the golden child in the family. His achievements were celebrated extravagantly while Robert's were merely acknowledged. This dynamic extended to the next generation. Jacob became the golden grandchild, while our Emma was treated as an afterthought. Jacob has always been a challenging child. He's loud, demanding, and prone to tantrums when he doesn't get his way. My in-laws have never seen this as problematic. "He's just spirited," Margaret would say. "He knows what he wants." Meanwhile, if Emma so much as spoke above a whisper, she was being difficult or showing off. The first time I noticed a real problem was at Emma's 4th birthday party. Jacob, then 5, wanted to open Emma's presents. When told he couldn't, he pushed Emma into her cake. Instead of disciplining Jacob, my in-laws laughed and called it just kids being kids. Robert brushed it off too, saying, "They're cousins, they'll have their moments." The incidents continued. Jacob would take toys from Emma, and when she protested, she was told to share with your cousin. If Emma took something of Jacob's, however, there was immediate intervention. "That's not yours, Emma," Margaret would scold. "Jacob doesn't have to share if he doesn't want to." I brought these concerns to Robert numerous times. "Your parents are treating Emma unfairly," I'd say. His response was always some version of, "That's just how they are," or "You're being too sensitive." It created a growing tension in our marriage, with Robert caught between supporting his wife and pleasing his parents. Emma, sweet and sensitive by nature, began to dread family gatherings. She'd cling to me and ask if we could stay home. When I asked why, she'd just say, "I don't think Grandma and Grandpa like me very much." It broke my heart, but Robert insisted she was misinterpreting things. Last Christmas, the situation escalated when Jacob received a mountain of gifts, while Emma got only 2 small presents. When I mentioned the disparity, William said, "Well, boys are more expensive to shop for." I watched Emma's face fall as she tried to hide her disappointment. That night, I told Robert we needed to limit our visits, but he accused me of trying to separate him from his family. Our parenting styles differed dramatically from Thomas and Beth's approach with Jacob. We believed in setting boundaries and teaching Emma about consequences, while they seemed to let Jacob do whatever he wanted. Beth occasionally showed signs of concern about Jacob's behavior, but Thomas was quick to shut down any suggestion that their son needed guidance. Despite the tensions, we maintained regular family dinners at Margaret and William's house. Robert insisted these gatherings were important for Emma to build relationships with her extended family. I reluctantly agreed, though I made sure to stay close to Emma during these visits. The week before the incident, Jacob had pushed Emma while they were playing in the backyard. When I brought it up, Margaret said, "Emma needs to toughen up. The real world isn't going to coddle her." I noticed Robert wincing at his mother's words, but as usual, he said nothing. By the time Sunday's dinner came around, my patience with the situation was wearing thin. Little did I know this would be the day everything changed. The Sunday started like any other family gathering at my in-laws' house. Robert and I arrived with Emma around 4 in the afternoon, bringing a homemade apple pie that Margaret would inevitably criticize for not being quite right. The house smelled of pot roast and potatoes. William prided himself on his cooking, one of the few genuinely pleasant aspects of these visits. Thomas, Beth, and Jacob arrived shortly after us. Jacob immediately ran to the playroom where the adults had set up toys for the children, barely acknowledging anyone's presence. Emma hesitated before following him, looking at me with those uncertain eyes that always made my heart ache. "Go ahead, sweetie," I encouraged her. "I'll be right in the living room if you need me." The adults settled in the living room with drinks, wine for the women, beer for the men. Margaret launched into her usual interrogation about our lives, focusing particularly on Robert's work and whether he was finally going to get that promotion Thomas had received years ago at a different company. I sat quietly, nodding at appropriate intervals while keeping an ear tuned toward the playroom. About 30 minutes into our visit, Robert's phone rang. It was his boss, unusual for a Sunday, but there was an issue with a client in a different time zone that couldn't wait. He stepped onto the back porch to take the call, leaving me alone with his family. "Emma seems so quiet lately," Margaret commented as Robert left. "Is she making any friends at school?" "Jacob has so many friends, the phone never stops ringing." The comparison was typical, subtle enough that calling it out would make me seem oversensitive. Thomas chimed in, "Jacob's teacher says he's a natural leader. All the kids follow what he does." Beth nodded proudly, though I'd noticed before that she sometimes seemed uncomfortable with these conversations. William was about to add something when I heard a thud from the playroom, followed by Emma's cry. I was on my feet instantly, but William waved dismissively. "Let them sort it out. Kids need to learn to resolve their own conflicts." Something in me refused to sit back down. "I'll just check," I said, already moving toward the playroom. What I saw when I entered stopped me in my tracks. Emma was sitting on the floor, holding her arm, tears streaming down her face. Jacob stood over her, clutching a colorful toy robot that I recognized as the one I'd bought for Emma's birthday the previous month. She had brought it along today because it was her current favorite. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to Emma's side. Before Emma could answer, Margaret appeared behind me. "What's all this fuss about?" she asked. Emma looked up, her voice trembling. "Jacob wanted my robot, and I said we could take turns, but he grabbed it and pushed me." Jacob immediately countered. She wouldn't share. "And she called me stupid." I examined Emma's arm, seeing the red mark forming near her elbow. "Did you push her, Jacob?" I asked directly. "She wouldn't give me the toy," he insisted, as if this justified his actions. Margaret stepped forward. "Now, Emma, you know you're supposed to share with your cousin." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was pushed to the ground. "Margaret, she's hurt." William joined us, surveying the scene with a frown. "What's going on?" "Jacob pushed Emma and took her toy," I explained. William sighed as if I was making a mountain out of a molehill. "He's a boy, Hazel. Boys play rough sometimes." Emma must have said something to provoke him. I stared at him, incredulous. "So it's Emma's fault she was pushed?" Margaret put her hand on Jacob's shoulder protectively. "Jacob, did Emma say something mean to you?" Jacob, quickly picking up on the direction of the conversation, nodded vigorously. "She said I couldn't play with the robot because it's hers and I'd break it." "See?" Margaret said, as if this explained everything. "Emma needs to learn to be more generous." I looked at my daughter, who was still holding her arm, confusion and hurt written across her face. "Emma doesn't have to share everything, especially not with someone who hurts her. Oh, for heaven's sake, William interjected. This is how children learn. Jacob is just being a normal boy. Emma needs to toughen up a bit. Margaret nodded in agreement. Emma, I think you owe Jacob an apology for not sharing and for saying mean things. I was about to protest when Emma, ever the peacemaker, quietly said, I'm sorry, Jacob. Jacob smirked, clutching the robot tighter. The look of victory on his face made my blood boil. They're all better, Margaret said with satisfaction. Now you two play nicely. I looked at my daughter, sitting there having been forced to apologize to the very person who hurt her. Something inside me snapped. Years of watching Emma being diminished, of having her feelings invalidated, of being expected to accept mistreatment, it all culminated in this moment. I smiled, though fury burned inside me. Without a word, I picked Emma up, grabbed her small backpack, and walked toward the front door. Where are you going? Margaret called after me. Dinner's almost ready. I didn't respond. I didn't look back. I strapped Emma into her car seat, got behind the wheel, and drove away, leaving stunned silence behind us. Robert called about 10 minutes later, confused and concerned. What happened? Why did you leave? Call me when you're ready to come home, I replied calmly. We need to talk. The drive home was quiet at first. In the rearview mirror, I could see Emma looking out the window, her small face troubled. I waited until we were about halfway home before speaking. Emma, sweetie, I want you to know something very important, I said, making sure my voice was steady despite the anger still simmering inside me. What happened back there wasn't right. You don't ever have to let anyone hurt you, and you certainly don't have to apologize when someone else does something wrong. Emma's eyes met mine in the mirror. But Grandma said I had to say sorry. Grandma was wrong, I said firmly. Even adults can be wrong sometimes. No one has the right to hurt you, not even your cousin. She was quiet for a moment. Jacob does that a lot, she finally admitted. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What do you mean a lot? He pushes me or grabs things from me when the grown-ups aren't looking. Last time, he pinched me really hard and said if I told anyone, no one would believe me because everyone likes him better. My heart shattered. All this time, my daughter had been enduring mistreatment in silence. Emma, why didn't you tell me this before? Her answer was devastating in its simplicity. Daddy always says I should try harder to get along with Jacob. And Grandma and Grandpa always take his side. We arrived home, and I helped Emma get settled with a snack and her favorite cartoon while I processed what I'd learned. This wasn't just about one incident. It was a pattern of behavior that everyone had enabled, including, to my shame, myself. By continuing to expose Emma to these situations, I had failed to protect her. Robert came home about an hour later, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. What happened? He demanded as soon as he walked through the door. My parents said you just grabbed Emma and left without explanation. I asked him to join me in the kitchen, away from Emma's ears. Jacob pushed Emma to the ground and took her toy. When she tried to explain, your parents accused her of provoking him and forced her to apologize to Jacob. Robert ran a hand through his hair. I'm sure it wasn't that bad. Kids get into scuffles all the time. Emma just told me that Jacob regularly hurts her when adults aren't looking. He's been bullying her. Robert and your parents have been enabling it. Kids will be kids, he started, but I cut him off. No. That's exactly the attitude that's allowing this to continue. Would you say kids will be kids if it was some stranger's child hurting Emma? Or is it only acceptable because it's your nephew? Robert looked taken aback. Of course, I don't want Emma to be hurt. But you know how my parents are. They've always favored Thomas and Jacob. And that makes it okay? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Your daughter is being hurt physically and emotionally, and you're worried about rocking the boat with your parents? What do you want me to do, Hazel? Cut them off? They're my family. We're your family, I countered. Emma and I are your family. And right now, your daughter needs you to stand up for her. Our argument continued for nearly an hour, with Robert alternating between defensiveness and grudging acknowledgement that something needed to change. By the end, he agreed that Jacob's behavior was problematic, but he was still resistant to confronting his parents directly. As if on cue, Robert's phone rang. It was Margaret. He put it on speaker. "Robert, your wife's behavior today was completely unacceptable," she began without preamble. "To walk out before dinner without even saying goodbye. We expect an apology." Robert looked at me, conflicted. I shook my head firmly. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "Jacob pushed Emma and took her toy. Hazel was upset that you made Emma apologize." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Margaret huffed. "Jacob is just being a normal boy. Emma needs to learn to share and not be so sensitive. You need to talk to your wife about her overreaction." After the call ended, I looked at Robert. "Do you see now? They don't even acknowledge that what Jacob did was wrong." That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open. Sleep wasn't coming, so I might as well be productive. I began researching child development and bullying behaviors, reading articles from child psychologists about the importance of teaching children to respect boundaries. I found resources about how enabling bad behavior in children can lead to more serious problems as they grow older. I called Emma's pediatrician first thing Monday morning and scheduled an appointment. Dr. Larson examined Emma's arm, noting the bruise that had formed, and asked her gentle questions about what happened. When Emma mentioned that Jacob had hurt her before, Dr. Larson gave me a concerned look. "Emma, would you like to look at some books in the waiting room for a few minutes while I talk to your mom?" she asked. Once Emma was out of earshot, Dr. Larson turned to me. "Hazel, repeated aggressive behavior like this needs to be addressed. It's not just boys being boys. It's a pattern that can cause lasting harm to both children. Jacob is learning that his actions have no consequences, while Emma is learning that her boundaries don't matter." I nodded, tears threatening. "I know. I'm trying to figure out how to handle it. Document everything," she advised. "And be clear about your boundaries. Emma needs to see that you'll protect her, even if it means making difficult decisions about family relationships." That evening, while Robert played with Emma, I sat down and started documenting every incident I could remember involving Jacob and our in-laws' dismissive responses. The list was longer than I expected, dating back to when Emma was just a toddler. I also drafted an email that I knew would change our family dynamics forever. "What are you doing?" Robert asked when he came to bed and found me still typing. "I'm taking a stand," I replied, showing him the list I'd compiled. "This has been going on for years, Robert. It stops now." He read through the incidents, his face growing increasingly troubled. I had no idea it was this bad, because every single time it was dismissed as normal or as Emma's fault. But look at the pattern. This isn't healthy for anyone, not for Emma and not even for Jacob. He's learning that he can hurt others without consequences. Robert was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" I showed him the draft email addressed to his parents, Thomas and Beth. It laid out the pattern of behavior, included educational resources about child development and bullying, and set clear boundaries for future interactions. The conditions were non-negotiable: acknowledgement of the problem, a sincere apology to Emma, and a commitment to addressing Jacob's behavior. "If they can't agree to these terms," I said quietly, "then we need to limit Emma's exposure to them. I won't keep subjecting her to an environment where she's being hurt." Robert read the email twice. I could see the internal struggle on his face, the little boy who wanted his parents' approval battling with the father who needed to protect his daughter. "Send it," he finally said. "You're right. This has gone on too long." I hit send at 1:37 a.m., knowing that the next day would bring either the beginning of healing or the deepening of divisions. Either way, things would never be the same. The email I sent to my in-laws, Thomas and Beth, was the result of hours of careful thought and research. I wanted it to be educational rather than accusatory, though I didn't shy away from the hard truths. The subject line read, "Concerning Sunday's incident and moving forward." I began by detailing what happened on Sunday, being careful to stick to the facts without emotional language. Then I listed the previous incidents Emma had experienced, dating back to when she was 3 years old. Reading it all laid out chronologically made the pattern undeniable. Emma has shared with me that Jacob regularly hurts her when adults aren't present, I wrote. She's been afraid to speak up because she's been conditioned to believe that her feelings don't matter and that no one will believe her. This is deeply concerning, not just for Emma's well-being, but for Jacob's development as well. I included links to articles from child psychologists about the importance of teaching children about consent and respecting physical boundaries. I attached a PDF about the long-term effects of childhood bullying, both on the victims and on the children who are allowed to bully others without intervention. Children who are permitted to hurt others without consequences often struggle with relationships and boundaries as they grow older, I explained. By dismissing Jacob's behavior as normal or acceptable, we're doing him a disservice. He needs guidance to develop empathy and self-control. I also attached a photo of Emma's arm, showing the bruise that had formed where Jacob had pushed her. Seeing the physical evidence made the situation impossible to minimize. Moving forward, I continued, we need to establish some guidelines for family interactions. These are non-negotiable if we want to maintain a healthy relationship between our families. 1. Acknowledgement that pushing, hitting, or otherwise physically hurting others is never acceptable, regardless of gender. 2. A sincere apology to Emma from both Jacob and the adults who dismissed her experience. 3. A commitment to addressing problematic behavior immediately when it occurs, without placing blame on the victim. 4. Agreement to attend at least one family therapy session to discuss healthy boundaries and conflict resolution. 5. Understanding that Emma will not be forced to share her belongings or to spend time alone with Jacob until trust has been rebuilt. I concluded by expressing hope that we could work together to create a healthier dynamic for all the children in the family. We love you all and want Emma to have a close relationship with her grandparents and cousin. But that relationship must be built on mutual respect and safety. I included a note from Dr. Larson about the psychological impact of forcing children to accept mistreatment. When we tell children to apologize for being hurt, we teach them that their boundaries don't matter and that speaking up against mistreatment is wrong. This can have lasting effects on their self-esteem and future relationships. Before sending the email, I showed it to Robert one more time. He read it carefully, his expression serious. "This is going to upset them," he said finally. "I know. But is there anything in here that isn't true or necessary?" He shook his head slowly. "No. It's all factual. And it needs to be said." He looked me in the eyes. "Send it. I'm with you on this." Hitting that send button felt like setting off an explosion with a delayed fuse. I knew it wouldn't be long before the fallout began. The response was swift and exactly as I'd expected. My phone started ringing at 7:22 a.m. It was Margaret. I let it go to voicemail, needing to get Emma ready for school before dealing with the situation. When I checked the message later, Margaret's voice was tight with anger. "I don't appreciate being lectured about how to handle children, Hazel. We raised 2 successful sons without all these modern parenting theories. Call me back immediately so we can discuss your ridiculous demands." William called Robert at work, trying to bypass me entirely. "Your wife is overreacting," he told Robert. "Jacob is just a normal, active boy. Emma needs to learn to stand up for herself instead of having her mother fight her battles." I was proud when Robert stood his ground. "Dad, Jacob hurt Emma. That's not acceptable, no matter how you try to justify it." The most surprising response came from Beth. She texted me directly. "Can we meet for coffee? Just the 2 of us. There's more to this situation than you know." Throughout the day, the calls and texts continued. Margaret tried various approaches: anger, guilt, appeals to family loyalty. After all we've done for you and Emma, one message read, "This is how you repay us? By attacking our parenting and threatening to keep Emma away." I maintained radio silence, giving them time to process the email fully. That evening, Robert and I sat down with Emma and had an age-appropriate conversation about boundaries. "Your body belongs to you," I told her. "No one has the right to hurt you, and you don't have to share your things if you don't want to." "Even with Jacob?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Especially with Jacob," Robert affirmed, and I felt a surge of love for my husband. "And if anyone ever hurts you or makes you feel bad, you can always tell us. We will always believe you and protect you." The relief on Emma's face broke my heart. How long had she been carrying this burden, thinking she had to accept mistreatment to please her family? The next morning, I met Beth at a quiet cafe away from both our homes. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "I want you to know that I agree with everything in your email," she said without preamble. "Jacob's behavior has been concerning me for some time, but Thomas and his parents always shut me down when I try to address it." She revealed that Jacob had been having problems at school too. His teacher had called multiple times about aggressive behavior toward classmates. Thomas's parents always say it's the other kid's fault, or the teacher is targeting Jacob unfairly. Thomas believes them because it's easier than facing the truth. "Which is?" I prompted. "That Jacob needs help," she said simply. "He's struggling with impulse control and empathy, and instead of getting him the support he needs, everyone's pretending there's no problem." She looked down at her coffee. "I've tried to talk to his pediatrician, but Thomas always takes over the appointments and dismisses my concerns." This conversation gave me hope that at least one other adult in the family recognized the seriousness of the situation. Before we parted, Beth agreed to support our conditions and to work on getting Thomas on board as well. Later that day, Thomas called Robert, furious about the email. "Your wife is trying to turn Beth against me," he accused. "Jacob is a normal kid. Stop letting Hazel make mountains out of molehills." Robert held firm. "This isn't about taking sides, Thomas. It's about making sure both kids are safe and learning healthy ways to interact." The standoff continued through the evening, with Margaret and William rallying Thomas to their side, while Beth cautiously aligned with us. The family was fracturing along lines that had always existed beneath the surface, but had never been so explicitly exposed. That night, Robert and I were more united than we had been in years. "I should have stood up to them sooner," he admitted as we got ready for bed. "I always knew they favored Thomas and Jacob, but I told myself it wasn't that bad or that you were being too sensitive." "What changed?" I asked. "Seeing that bruise on Emma's arm," he said quietly, "and realizing that she's been hurting for years while I looked the other way." "What kind of father does that make me?" "One who's learning and growing," I said, taking his hand. "That's all any of us can do." We went to bed that night not knowing what the next day would bring. The battle lines had been drawn, but we were prepared for whatever came next. What we weren't prepared for was the phone call that came at 6:15 the next morning. It was Beth, her voice shaking. "William's in the hospital. He had chest pains last night. It's not a heart attack, just angina, but it scared everyone. He's asking to see you and Emma." William's health scare changed the dynamic in ways I couldn't have predicted. Robert and I debated whether to visit the hospital and ultimately decided that Robert would go alone first to assess the situation. Emma was still asleep, and I wasn't willing to bring her into what might be another emotionally fraught situation. "I'll go see how he is," Robert said, grabbing his keys. "If it seems appropriate, maybe you and Emma can come later." I nodded, relieved that we were on the same page. "Be careful," I warned. This could be a genuine olive branch, or it could be a manipulation tactic. Robert returned 3 hours later, his expression thoughtful. "Dad's okay," he reported. "The doctor says it was stress-induced angina. Not a heart attack, but definitely a warning sign." "How is everyone behaving?" I asked cautiously. "Subdued," he replied. "Mom was crying, of course. Thomas was pacing around like a caged animal. Beth looked exhausted. He paused. Dad asked about you and Emma. He seemed genuinely sorry you weren't there. I raised an eyebrow. Did he say that? Not in so many words, Robert admitted. But it was the first time he's ever actually asked about Emma's well-being. He wanted to know if her arm was better. This small sign of concern was unexpected. While I wasn't ready to assume it represented a real change of heart, it was at least an acknowledgement that Emma had been hurt. The hospital incident created a temporary ceasefire. No one called or texted demanding apologies or making accusations. It was as if everyone needed time to recalibrate after the shock. During this lull, I received an unexpected call from Emma's school. Mrs. Reynolds? This is Mrs. Patel, Jacob's teacher. Beth gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I was surprised but curious. Yes, of course. What can I help you with? Beth mentioned there have been some incidents between Jacob and Emma outside of school, she said carefully. I wanted you to know that we've been addressing similar behaviors here. Jacob has been having difficulty respecting other children's boundaries. She explained that they'd implemented a behavior plan for Jacob, but without support from home, progress was limited. Beth is on board with getting Jacob the help he needs, but she's mentioned that her husband and in-laws are resistant. This conversation confirmed what Beth had told me and added an important perspective. Jacob's behavior wasn't just a family issue, it was affecting his functioning at school as well. I thanked Mrs. Patel for reaching out and promised to keep her updated on our family's progress in addressing the situation. That evening, Robert received a text from Thomas that surprised us both. Can we talk? Just us brothers. No wives. Robert looked at me questioningly. Should I go? I considered for a moment. Yes, but be clear about where you stand. This isn't about taking sides against spouses. It's about doing what's right for the kids. Robert met Thomas at a bar near Thomas's office. When he returned, his expression was a mix of weariness and cautious optimism. He's scared, Robert reported. Dad's health scare made him realize how fragile everything is. And Jacob's teacher called him in for a conference yesterday. She showed him documentation of multiple incidents where Jacob hurt other kids. He can't deny it anymore. How did he react? I asked. Defensive at first. Blamed the school, the other kids, Beth for coddling Jacob. But eventually, he admitted he's worried about his son. Robert sighed. He asked me what we're doing with Emma that makes her so well-behaved. That's the first time he's ever acknowledged that Emma is doing well, not just too sensitive or too quiet. This was another small but significant shift. The family dynamics that had seemed set in stone for years were beginning to crack under the pressure of reality. The next day, Beth called me. Thomas talked to Jacob's pediatrician, she said, her voice tense with restrained excitement. We're getting a referral to a child psychologist. Thomas is actually on board. What changed his mind? I asked. Your email, Dad's health scare, the school conference, all of it together. He finally had to face that this isn't just me being overprotective. She paused. And he saw the photo of Emma's bruise. That really hit him hard, seeing physical evidence of what Jacob did. 2 days after William came home from the hospital, Margaret called me directly. I braced myself for another confrontation, but her voice was subdued. Hazel, I think we need to talk. All of us, together. Can you and Robert bring Emma over this weekend? William's feeling much better, and we have some things we need to discuss as a family. I was cautious. Margaret, I appreciate the invitation, but I need to be clear, we're not bringing Emma into a situation where she might be made to feel responsible for any of this. I understand, she said, and to my surprise, she sounded sincere. This isn't about placing blame. It's about figuring out how to move forward. After consulting with Robert, we agreed to meet at their house on Saturday afternoon, with the understanding that we would leave immediately if things became negative. We prepared Emma carefully, explaining that we were going to talk with her grandparents about making sure everyone treats each other kindly. Will Jacob be there? She asked, a flicker of anxiety crossing her face. No, sweetie, I assured her. Just Grandma, Grandpa, Uncle Thomas, and Aunt Beth. And Dad and I will be with you the whole time. When we arrived at my in-laws' house, the atmosphere was noticeably different from our usual visits. Gone was the forced joviality that typically masked the undercurrents of criticism and comparison. Instead, there was a subdued tension, the kind that comes when people know difficult conversations lie ahead. William looked pale but composed, sitting in his usual armchair. Margaret had prepared a simple spread of coffee and store-bought cookies, unusual for her, as she typically made elaborate homemade treats that she would pointedly mention had taken all day. Thomas and Beth arrived shortly after us. Beth immediately came to greet Emma with genuine warmth, while Thomas hung back, looking uncomfortable. I noticed he couldn't quite look at Emma's arm, though the bruise had mostly faded. Margaret suggested that Emma might like to watch a movie in the den while the adults talked. I was about to object when Emma spoke up. Can I stay? She asked quietly. You're going to talk about me and Jacob, right? The adults exchanged glances. It was Robert who answered. Yes, sweetie, we are. But some of it might be grown-up talk that could be boring or confusing. Emma straightened her shoulders in a gesture so adult it made my heart ache. I want to stay. I promise I'll tell you if I want to leave. Robert looked at me, and I nodded. Emma deserved to be part of this conversation about her own safety and well-being. William cleared his throat. Well, I suppose we should get started. He looked directly at Emma, something he rarely did. Emma, your grandmother and I owe you an apology. We didn't listen to you when you were hurt, and we made you apologize when you didn't do anything wrong. That wasn't fair. Emma's eyes widened at this unexpected acknowledgement. She glanced at me, and I gave her an encouraging nod. Thank you, Grandpa, she said simply. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. When your grandfather had to go to the hospital, it made us think about what's really important. And hurting people's feelings or letting someone get hurt because of old-fashioned ideas, that's not what family should be about. Thomas spoke next, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Jacob's teacher has been trying to tell us for months that there are problems. I didn't want to hear it. It was easier to think everyone else was overreacting. He looked at Emma directly for the first time. I'm sorry he hurt you, Emma. And I'm sorry I didn't do anything about it sooner. Beth reached over and squeezed Thomas's hand, her relief at his acknowledgement evident. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. There were moments of defensiveness, particularly from Margaret, who struggled to let go of her boys will be boys mindset. William occasionally lapsed into justifications about how things were done in my day. But each time, someone, Robert, me, Beth, or even Thomas, gently redirected the conversation back to the core issue, the children's well-being. By the end of the afternoon, we had established some preliminary agreements. 1. Jacob would continue seeing the child psychologist Beth had found. 2. Any playtime between Jacob and Emma would be fully supervised for the foreseeable future. 3. Everyone agreed to a family session with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. 4. The adults would work on validating Emma's feelings and respecting her boundaries. 5. Physical aggression would never be dismissed as normal or acceptable. As we prepared to leave, Emma surprised everyone by approaching William's chair. I hope you feel better, Grandpa, she said, patting his hand gently. William's eyes glistened. Thank you, Emma. I'm already feeling much better. In the car on the way home, Emma was thoughtful. Are things going to be different now? She asked. Robert and I exchanged glances. We're going to try to make them different, I said honestly. Everyone has promised to work on treating each other with more kindness and respect. Even Jacob? Jacob is learning, Robert explained. Just like you learn math or reading at school, he needs to learn how to manage his feelings without hurting others. It might take some time. Emma nodded, accepting this explanation. I'm glad Grandma and Grandpa said sorry. That was hard for them. Out of the mouths of babes. Even at 7, Emma understood something profound about human nature, how difficult it is to admit when we're wrong, and how meaningful it is when we do. That night, as Robert and I discussed the day's events, he seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted. I've spent my whole life trying to please my parents, he admitted, always feeling like I was second best after Thomas. Today was the first time I felt like I was doing the right thing, not just trying to keep the peace. I squeezed his hand. You stood up for your daughter. That matters more than anything. We stood up for her, he corrected. And somehow it brought the whole family to a better place. He shook his head in wonder. Who would have thought that setting boundaries would actually bring us closer together? The road ahead would not be smooth. I harbored no illusions about that. Years of established patterns wouldn't change overnight. But for the first time, I felt genuine hope that our extended family could evolve into something healthier for all of us, especially for the children. A week after our family meeting, Margaret called to invite us to lunch at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Just the 4 of us, she specified. You, Robert, William, and me. We'd like to talk more about moving forward. I agreed cautiously, still not entirely convinced that their change of heart was genuine or lasting. Robert was similarly skeptical but hopeful. Dad's health scare really shook them, he reminded me. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to make people reevaluate their priorities. We arranged for Emma to have a play date with her best friend from school, ensuring she wouldn't feel left out or anxious about the meeting. Before leaving, I reviewed our boundaries with Robert. We need to be united, I emphasized. No letting them minimize what happened or revert to old patterns. He nodded firmly. Agreed. This is too important to backslide on. The cafe Margaret had chosen was a neutral space, not their territory, not ours. It was a peaceful setting with well-spaced tables that offered privacy for conversation. When we arrived, Margaret and William were already seated, looking somewhat tense but composed. After ordering drinks, William took the lead, surprising me with his directness. We've been doing a lot of thinking since our meeting last week, he began. And we've realized that we've been, well, wrong about a number of things. Margaret nodded, twisting her napkin nervously. We come from a different generation, she added. When our boys were growing up, the approach to discipline and behavior was different. Boys were expected to be rough, and children were expected to work things out themselves. But that doesn't make it right, William interjected, placing his hand over Margaret's fidgeting ones. The world has changed, and frankly, maybe the old ways weren't as good as we like to remember. I glanced at Robert, seeing the surprise on his face mirroring my own. This level of self-reflection was unprecedented from his parents. Margaret continued, After you sent that email, Hazel, I was angry. I felt attacked and judged as a grandmother and as a mother. But then when William had his episode, her voice faltered. The doctor said it was stress-induced, William explained. And it made us think about what's really important. Not being right. Not maintaining some image of a perfect family. But actually being there for our family. All of our family. We've been reading some of those articles you sent, Margaret admitted. About children's development and the importance of boundaries. It's eye-opening. Thomas and Beth came over yesterday, William added. They told us that Jacob has started seeing a child psychologist. Dr. Rodriguez, I believe. Robert nodded. Beth mentioned that. How do you feel about it? There was a moment of hesitation before William answered. Initially, I thought it was an overreaction. In my day, children didn't need therapists unless something was seriously wrong. He sighed. But Jacob had another incident at school. He pushed a little girl who wouldn't let him use the computer during free time. The school called Thomas in for a conference. That must have been difficult for everyone, I said carefully. Margaret's eyes welled with tears. It was a wake-up call. Thomas was so upset. He said he didn't want Jacob to grow up thinking it was okay to hurt people to get his way. And he's right. What kind of future would that lead to? We realized we've been enabling behavior that could harm Jacob's future, William admitted. Not to mention hurting Emma and other children in the process. The conversation flowed more easily after these initial admissions. We discussed practical steps for moving forward, how to handle future family gatherings, how to support both children through this transition, how to rebuild trust between all family members. We'd like to try a supervised play date, Margaret suggested tentatively. When you feel Emma is ready, of course. We could all be present. You, Robert, Thomas, Beth, and both of us. Just a short visit to start rebuilding. I considered this carefully. I think that could work as long as we're all on the same page about intervention if needed. Emma needs to see that all the adults will protect her if necessary. Absolutely, William agreed quickly. No more looking the other way or making excuses. We also discussed the family therapy session that had been scheduled for the following month. Both Margaret and William expressed nervousness about it, but confirmed their commitment to attending. It won't be easy, Margaret acknowledged. Talking about feelings isn't something our generation was encouraged to do. It's not always easy for our generation either, Robert said with a small smile. But it's worth it. As we prepared to leave, Margaret reached across the table and took my hand, an unprecedented gesture. Thank you for not giving up on us, she said quietly. You would have been justified in cutting us off after how we treated Emma. The fact that you're willing to work through this, it means everything. I squeezed her hand, feeling the first genuine connection we'd ever shared. Family is worth fighting for, I said. Even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. In the car on the way home, Robert was unusually quiet. Are you okay? I asked, reaching over to touch his arm. I'm trying to process everything, he admitted. I've spent my whole life believing I could never measure up to Thomas in my parents' eyes. That nothing I did was ever quite good enough. And now, suddenly, they're listening to us. Taking our concerns seriously. It's disorienting. Family dynamics can be incredibly powerful, I observed. They shape how we see ourselves and how we interact with the world. Changing those patterns isn't easy. No, he agreed. But necessary. He glanced at me. I'm proud of us. For standing firm, even when it was uncomfortable. For not accepting the status quo when it was hurting Emma. The following weekend, we attempted the supervised play date. We chose a public park with a playground, neutral territory where both children could have space if needed. Emma was nervous, but willing to try, especially after we assured her that all the adults would be watching closely and would step in immediately if any problems arose. Jacob arrived with Thomas and Beth, looking subdued. Beth had prepared him for the visit, explaining that he needed to be gentle and respectful. To everyone's surprise, it was Jacob who approached Emma first. I'm sorry I pushed you and took your robot, he said, clearly rehearsed, but seemingly sincere. Dr. Rodriguez is helping me learn to use my words instead of my hands when I'm upset. Emma regarded him cautiously. Okay, she said. Thank you for saying sorry. The children played separately at first, with Emma staying close to me while Jacob explored the climbing structure with Thomas nearby. Gradually, they began to interact in small ways, taking turns on the slide, playing an impromptu game of Simon Says That Beth initiated. There was one tense moment when Jacob wanted to use the swing Emma was on. His face darkened with frustration, and I saw him clench his fists at his sides. But before any adult could intervene, he took a deep breath and said, "Can I have a turn when you're done?" Emma nodded, and I exchanged a glance with Beth, who looked both relieved and proud. It was a small victory, but a significant one. As the playdate came to an end, Margaret approached me. This went better than I expected, she admitted. It's a process, I reminded her. There will be good days and difficult ones. The important thing is that we're all committed to making it work. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about something you said in your email, about how we might have been doing Jacob a disservice by excusing his behavior. I didn't want to see it then, but you were right. Children need boundaries to feel secure. William and I thought we were being loving by letting Jacob do whatever he wanted, but really, we were setting him up for failure. This insight surprised me. That's a profound realization, Margaret. Well, she said with a small smile, it turns out you can teach an old dog new tricks after all. On the drive home, Emma was thoughtful. Jacob seemed different today, she observed. How so? Robert asked. He used his words instead of grabbing or pushing. And he took turns without getting mad. She considered this for a moment. Do you think he's going to stay that way? It's going to take time and practice, I explained. Just like learning to ride a bike or read. He's learning new skills for managing his feelings and getting along with others. There might be times when he forgets or slips back into old habits. But it seems like he's trying, and that's a good start. Emma nodded, accepting this. I'm glad everyone's helping him learn. It's not fun to be around someone who hurts you. No, it's not, Robert agreed, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. And you never have to accept that from anyone. That evening, as we tucked Emma into bed, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Mom, why did Grandma and Grandpa let Jacob hurt me before? Didn't they love me? My heart ached at the confusion in her voice. I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. They do love you, sweetie. But sometimes adults can have wrong ideas about how children should behave or how to handle problems. They thought they were doing the right thing, even though they weren't. Like when I thought 7 plus 8 was 14 on my math test, she suggested. I was really sure I was right, but I was wrong. I smiled at her simple but profound analogy. Exactly like that. And just like you learned the correct answer was 15, Grandma and Grandpa are learning better ways to handle situations with you and Jacob. She seemed satisfied with this explanation, snuggling deeper under her covers. I'm glad they're learning. It feels better when grown-ups keep you safe. That's our job, Robert said, bending to kiss her forehead. And we'll always do our best to keep you safe and make sure you're treated with respect. As we closed Emma's door, Robert pulled me into a hug. We did good, he whispered. Standing up for her, pushing for change, not accepting the status quo. I leaned into his embrace, feeling the truth of his words. We did. And we'll keep doing it, one day at a time. 1 month after the incident that changed everything, our family landscape had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. The journey hadn't been smooth. There had been moments of backsliding, misunderstandings, and the occasional flare of old tensions. But the overall trajectory was undeniably positive. The first family therapy session had been challenging but productive. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, had a gift for creating a safe space where everyone could express their feelings without judgment. William struggled the most, clearly uncomfortable with the vulnerability required, but even he had made important admissions about his tendency to dismiss emotional concerns as weakness. In my family, showing emotions was considered a failing, he explained during our second session. My father believed that men should be stoic and women should be accommodating. I see now how that limited perspective has affected my relationships with my sons and grandchildren. Margaret had surprised everyone by embracing the therapy process wholeheartedly. I've spent decades trying to maintain this image of a perfect family, she confessed. Always comparing us to others, always pushing for achievements that would make us look good. I never stopped to consider if we were actually happy. The supervised playdates between Emma and Jacob continued, gradually increasing in duration as Jacob demonstrated more consistent control over his impulses. There had been setbacks, a tense moment over a board game when Jacob thought Emma was cheating, a brief regression when Jacob was overtired and grabbed a toy from Emma's hands. But unlike before, these incidents were addressed immediately and appropriately by all the adults present. Jacob's therapy was making a difference. Dr. Rodriguez had diagnosed him with ADHD and some difficulty with emotional regulation, but assured Thomas and Beth that with proper support, Jacob could learn to manage his impulses effectively. They had implemented a consistent structure at home with clear expectations and consequences, which was helping Jacob feel more secure. "He's actually happier," Beth told me over coffee one afternoon. I was so afraid that setting firm boundaries would crush his spirit somehow. But he seems relieved to know exactly what the rules are and what happens if he breaks them. The unpredictability of our previous approach was actually making his behavior worse. Emma had blossomed over the past month. The wary, hesitant child who was always looking over her shoulder was being replaced by a more confident, expressive little girl. She still had moments of uncertainty around Jacob, but she was learning to speak up for herself in a way that made me incredibly proud. "Jacob, I don't want to play that game right now," I overheard her saying during a recent visit. "We can play what you want after I finish this drawing." This simple assertion would have been unthinkable a month ago, when Emma believed her wants and needs were less important than keeping the peace. Robert had grown too, finding his voice in his family in a way he never had before. He no longer defaulted to appeasing his parents or brother when conflicts arose. Instead, he stated his position calmly but firmly, maintaining boundaries while still showing love and respect. "I never realized how much energy I was expending trying to keep everyone happy," he told me one night. "Always walking on eggshells, always mediating, always compromising my own values to avoid rocking the boat. It's exhausting to live that way." "And now?" I asked. He smiled. "Now I'm just trying to do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." It's actually much simpler. Our marriage had strengthened through this challenge. The united front we presented wasn't just for show. We had developed a deeper understanding of each other's values and priorities. We communicated more openly about difficult topics, no longer avoiding potential conflicts out of fear they might damage our relationship. The most profound transformation, however, was in the relationship between the generations. Margaret and William were making genuine efforts to connect with Emma on her terms, asking about her interests, listening to her stories, respecting her boundaries. They still occasionally slipped into old patterns of comparison or dismissiveness, but they caught themselves more quickly and made amends. Thomas and Beth had become unexpected allies in maintaining the new family dynamic. "We've been enabling toxic patterns for years," Thomas admitted during a conversation with Robert. "It was easier to go along with Mom and Dad's favorites game than to challenge it." I'm sorry for the role I played in that. Jacob and Emma were developing a cautious friendship based on their shared interests in space and drawing. It wasn't the instant cousin bond that Margaret had always envisioned, but it was authentic and developing at its own pace. During our most recent family dinner, now held at a restaurant to neutral territory, I watched Emma showing Jacob how to draw a rocket ship. He was listening attentively, occasionally asking questions, but never grabbing the pencil or trying to take over. It was a small moment, but it represented enormous growth for both children. "They're going to be okay, aren't they?" Margaret asked softly, following my gaze. "I think so," I replied. "Children are remarkably resilient when they have the right support." She nodded thoughtfully. "I've been reading that book you recommended about generational patterns. It's illuminating. So many things I did with my sons were exactly what my mother did with me, even though I promised myself I'd be different." "Awareness is the first step to change," I reminded her. "We can't transform patterns we don't recognize." "True," she agreed. "I just wish I'd realized sooner. Before the damage was done?" I suggested gently. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, it's never too late to heal relationships," I assured her. "Look at how far we've all come in just a month." Later that evening, as we prepared for bed, Robert brought up something that had been on my mind as well. "Do you think we would have reached this point if you hadn't sent that email? If you hadn't taken such a definitive stand?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly, no. I think we would have continued in the same dysfunctional pattern indefinitely. Everyone was too invested in maintaining the status quo, even though it was hurting all of us in different ways. Including Jacob, Robert noted. He was learning that he could hurt others without consequences. What kind of future would that have created for him? Exactly. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is to hold them accountable, even when it's uncomfortable. He pulled me close. Thank you for having the courage to do that. For Emma, for all of us. As I drifted toward sleep, I reflected on the journey of the past month. The incident that had seemed so devastating at the time, finding Emma hurt and being dismissed by my in-laws, had ultimately become a catalyst for profound positive change. By refusing to accept the unacceptable, by standing firm in my boundaries, I had helped create space for healing and growth that benefited everyone, even those who initially resisted. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. We would continue to navigate challenges as they arose, continue to work on communication and boundaries, continue to prioritize the well-being of all the children in our family. But the foundation had been laid for healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than power dynamics or outdated expectations. I thought about Emma's words from earlier that day, spoken with the simple wisdom of a 7-year-old. It's better when everyone is kind, even when they disagree. Indeed it is. And sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to remind us of that fundamental truth. If you've ever had to stand up for your child against family pressure or set difficult boundaries with loved ones, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments. How did you navigate that challenging territory? What helped you stay strong when it would have been easier to back down? Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal growth, and share with someone who might need encouragement to hold firm in their own boundaries. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, protecting our children is always worth the discomfort of confrontation. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. My name is Abigail Walker, and I am 28 years old. Never in my wildest dreams did I think my sister Madison's Harvard graduation would become the day my parents publicly disowned me in front of 550 people. The ceremony was supposed to be a celebration, maybe even a chance to heal our fractured family. Instead, I discovered I had been systematically erased from the program, family photos, and even their will. The pain was unbearable, but what they didn't know was that I had finally uncovered the secret they had been hiding from me my entire life. If you're watching this video, I would love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how I stood up and changed my life forever. Growing up as Abigail Walker meant living in the constant shadow of my younger sister, Madison. From the moment she was born, it was clear that my parents, Gerald and Diana Walker, had a favorite child. While most parents try to hide their preferences, mine displayed their favoritism like a badge of honor. Madison was their golden child, their perfect daughter, while I was treated as an afterthought, a burden they reluctantly carried. My childhood bedroom walls were covered with academic certificates and honor roll recognition, but my parents barely acknowledged them. I still remember the day I won the state science competition in 8th grade. I rushed home with my trophy, excited to finally earn their approval. When I burst through the door, my mother simply glanced at me and said, "That's nice, Abby. Did you remember to pick up Madison's dance shoes like I asked?" My trophy ended up gathering dust on my bookshelf, while Madison's participation ribbons were prominently displayed in the living room. High school was no different. While Madison was driven to soccer practice in our father's luxury sedan, I took the bus to debate tournaments. When I was accepted to NYU with a partial scholarship, my father's response was, "Well, it's not Harvard, but I suppose it's better than community college." Meanwhile, Madison's acceptance to any advanced placement class was celebrated with dinner at expensive restaurants. To afford college, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings waiting tables, and weekends as a tutor. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but the alternative was dropping out. My parents had made it clear that their financial support was reserved for Madison's future. "She has real potential," my father once said within earshot, not realizing or perhaps not caring that I could hear him. During my sophomore year at NYU, I discovered something strange while helping my mother organize some files during a rare visit home. A document had fallen behind the drawer, And when I retrieved it, I noticed it was a life insurance policy that listed only Madison as a beneficiary. When I questioned my mother about it, she snatched it from my hands and said dismissively, "It's just an old policy. We have updated ones." But her reaction seemed disproportionate, almost panicked. My best friend Rachel Howard was the only person who truly understood what I was going through. We met during freshman orientation at NYU, and she quickly became the sister I wished I had. "Your parents are toxic, Abby," she would tell me. "You deserve so much better." Rachel's family welcomed me for holidays when returning to my own home became too painful, which happened more frequently as time passed. Despite the years of emotional neglect, a part of me still yearned for my parents' approval and love. So when the invitation to Madison's Harvard graduation arrived in my mailbox, it felt like an olive branch. Madison had personally called to insist I attend, which was unusual. We had never been close, but there was no active animosity between us. She was simply the favored child who accepted the preferential treatment as her birthright. "It would mean a lot to me if you came," Madison had said during our brief conversation. "The whole family will be there." The whole family implied I was considered part of it, which gave me hope. Perhaps time had softened my parents' inexplicable coldness toward me. Perhaps attending an important family function would be the first step toward healing the wounds that had shaped my entire life. I allowed myself to believe that things could change. With renewed optimism, I accepted the invitation. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter in our family story. How wrong I was to let hope overrule my better judgment. How naive to think that people who had shown me who they were for 28 years would suddenly become different. The moment I accepted Madison's invitation, I began planning. This graduation was my chance to show my family that I had succeeded despite their lack of support. I wanted to look perfect, confident, and successful. I spent nearly 2 months' worth of savings on a designer dress, a pale blue Vera, one that complemented my eyes and projected sophisticated elegance. It was extravagant, but I convinced myself it was an investment in my self-esteem. The cross-country flight from New York to Boston gave me too much time to think. 5 hours of replaying childhood memories, rehearsing conversations, and alternating between hope and anxiety. The woman seated next to me, an elderly lady named Dorothy, must have noticed my nervousness as I repeatedly folded and unfolded the graduation invitation. "Family event?" she asked kindly. "My sister's graduation from Harvard," I replied. "You must be very proud," she said with a warm smile. "I am," I answered, not mentioning that pride was just one of the complicated emotions swirling inside me. As the plane began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, my mind drifted to the last family gathering I had attended 3 years ago. It was Thanksgiving, and I had brought my then-boyfriend James to meet my family. Throughout dinner, my parents barely acknowledged his presence, directing all questions and conversation toward Madison and her accomplishments. When James mentioned that I had just been promoted at my marketing job, my father changed the subject so quickly it was as if he hadn't spoken at all. Later that night, I found James sitting alone on the porch, looking confused and uncomfortable. "Is it always like this?" he had asked. I simply nodded, too embarrassed to elaborate. We broke up 2 weeks later. He never mentioned my family as the reason, but I knew they were part of it. Who would want to be with someone whose own parents couldn't seem to love her? After checking into my hotel near Harvard Square, I watched other families arriving, their excitement palpable. Parents wore university merchandise and took countless photos of their graduating children. Their pride was so evident it made my chest ache with longing. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You've got this, Abby. Remember, you're amazing regardless of how they treat you. Call me anytime." Rachel's support meant everything, but it couldn't completely dissolve the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I had been seeing a therapist, Eleanor, for about a year, working through my family issues. Her parting advice before my trip had been clear. Manage your expectations, Abigail. People rarely change dramatically. Go for yourself, not for their approval. Sitting on the hotel bed, I rehearsed potential conversations with my parents. "Mom, Dad, it's good to see you. Too casual? I've missed you both. Too vulnerable? Congratulations on Madison's graduation. Safe, but impersonal. Nothing seemed right for the complexity of our relationship. How do you bridge a gap with people who never acknowledged there was one? While reorganizing my purse for the next day, I discovered a strange envelope I didn't remember packing. It was a plain manila envelope, unmarked except for a small coffee stain on one corner. I started to open it, but was interrupted by a call from Madison confirming the meeting time for tomorrow. The envelope slipped from my mind as I focused on getting enough rest for what would undoubtedly be an emotionally draining day. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home, wandering from room to room looking for family photos that included me, but finding only empty frames. I woke up unsettled, the dream too close to reality for comfort. As I prepared for the day, applying makeup with extra care and styling my hair into an elegant updo, I made a decision. Whatever happened today, I would maintain my dignity. I would not break down, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I had built a life without their support, and today I would show them the strong, successful woman I had become. With a final glance in the mirror and a deep breath, I left for Harvard Yard, the mysterious envelope tucked into my purse and temporarily forgotten in the rush of the morning. Little did I know it contained information that would change everything. Harvard Yard was a vision of academic prestige that morning, with crimson banners hanging from historic buildings and chairs arranged in perfect rows across the green lawn. Families streamed through the gates, everyone dressed in their finest, carrying flowers and gifts for their graduates. The atmosphere buzzed with pride and anticipation, a stark contrast to the cold knot forming in my stomach as I spotted my parents near the entrance. Gerald and Diana Walker stood tall and impeccably dressed, my father in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, my mother in a cream-colored designer ensemble that screamed old money elegance. They were speaking with another couple, laughing politely at something when they noticed my approach. Their smiles instantly faded. "Abigail," my mother said, her tone as chilly as a Boston winter. "No hug, no kiss on the cheek, not even a handshake. You're earlier than we expected." "Hello, Mom, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to make sure I had time to find my seat. My father barely glanced at me before checking his watch. "Madison should be with the other graduates by now. We need to find our reserved seating." Before I could respond, a tall, handsome man approached and slipped his arm around my mother's shoulders. She immediately brightened. "Abigail, this is Trevor Williams, Madison's fiancé," she said, her voice suddenly warm and proud. "Trevor, this is Madison's older sister." Not our daughter Abigail, but Madison's older sister, as if I existed only in relation to the favored child. Trevor extended his hand with a genuine smile, seemingly unaware of the family dynamics at play. "Great to finally meet you," he said. "Madison has mentioned you a few times." A few times. In what I later learned was a 3-year relationship. I shook his hand and managed a polite response, wondering what exactly Madison had told him about me, if anything substantive at all. As we made our way to the seating area, I was handed a graduation program by a student volunteer. Flipping through it, I found the family acknowledgement section where graduates thanked their loved ones. Madison's entry thanked my amazing parents, Gerald and Diana Walker, and my fiancé Trevor Williams for their endless support and love. No mention of a sister. I had been completely omitted, as if I didn't exist in her life. While scanning the program, I overheard my mother speaking to another parent a few feet away. "Yes, we're so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter," she was saying. "Our only child has always been exceptional." Our only child. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had been prepared for their usual coldness, but this public erasure was beyond anything I had anticipated. They weren't just ignoring me. They were actively denying my existence. When we reached the seating area, I noticed that the front rows were reserved for families of graduates with cards indicating names. My parents and Trevor headed directly to these seats, but when I tried to follow, my father turned to me with a dismissive gesture. "These are for immediate family only," he said quietly but firmly. You'll need to find seating in the general section. I stood frozen as they settled into their reserved seats without a backward glance. Numbly, I found a spot several rows back, surrounded by strangers who had arrived too late to sit with their own families. From this distance, I watched my parents posing for photos with Trevor, their body language relaxed and happy. They looked like the perfect family, minus one inconvenient daughter. A photographer who was taking professional family photos approached me briefly. Are you with the Walker family? He asked. Yes, I'm Abigail Walker, Madison's sister, I replied. He checked his list with a frown. I'm sorry, but I was instructed to take photos of Gerald, Diana, and Trevor only. The client specifically requested family photos without additional people. Additional people. Not family. Not even a sister. Just an unwanted extra that would ruin their perfect family portrait. During a lull in the pre-ceremony activities, I noticed a display of framed photos near the refreshment area, celebrating graduates and their journeys. There was a collection from the Walker family showing Madison at various ages, all her milestone moments captured and proudly displayed. What struck me wasn't just the quality of the photographs, but what was missing from them. Family vacation photos that I knew had originally included me had been digitally altered or recropped to remove any trace of my presence. A Christmas photo from Madison's 15th birthday that once showed 4 people now displayed only 3, with an awkward gap where I had stood. They hadn't just relegated me to the general seating area today, they had methodically erased me from their family history. The realization made me feel physically ill. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. There was something deeper, more deliberate in their rejection of me. As the ceremony was about to begin and the crowd settled into their seats, I noticed my mother distributing elegant gift bags to several people seated around them, undoubtedly containing expensive mementos to celebrate Madison's achievement. No bag made its way to me. It was as if I were invisible, a ghost haunting my own family's celebration. The cruel reality was becoming clearer with each passing moment. This wasn't a chance for reconciliation. This was something far worse. I had been invited not as a family member, but as a reluctant concession to Madison, perhaps to maintain appearances to her fiancé or friends who might have known she had a sister. But my parents were making it abundantly clear that while I might share their last name, I was not part of their family. The graduation ceremony began with a processional of faculty in their academic regalia, followed by the students in their black gowns and crimson hoods. The Harvard University Band played pomp and circumstance as 550 excited graduates filed into their seats, their futures bright with promise. In any other circumstance, it would have been a moving spectacle, but I could barely focus on the pageantry unfolding before me. The university president welcomed everyone with a speech about achievement, community, and the responsibility that came with a Harvard education. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated his eloquence. Instead, I kept replaying the morning's events in my mind, each slight and dismissal cutting deeper upon reflection. When it came time to announce the graduates receiving special honors, Madison's name was called early. Madison Elizabeth Walker, summa cum laude, the dean announced. The audience applauded as my sister stood, a gold cord glinting around her neck. From my distant seat, I could see my parents beaming with pride, my father actually wiping away a tear. I had never seen him show such emotion, not even when I graduated from NYU, an event they had declined to attend due to a scheduling conflict. After the individual honors were announced, the ceremony moved to a section dedicated to family recognition. The dean invited parents of graduates to stand when their child's name was called, a tradition meant to acknowledge the support system behind each successful student. When Madison Walker was announced, my parents not only stood but my father raised his hand to get the dean's attention. To my horror, the dean nodded and handed my father the microphone. This was not part of the program. Gerald Walker, always the influential businessman who could bend situations to his will, had apparently arranged this special moment. My wife Diana and I are so proud of our daughter Madison, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. Our only daughter has been a blessing since the day she was born. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure people around me could hear it. Did he really just say that again with a microphone in front of hundreds of people? Madison has always been the perfect child, exceeding our expectations in every way, he continued. She represents everything the Walker family stands for: excellence, integrity, and success. Each word was like a knife, precise and intentional. This wasn't just ignoring me. This was a deliberate public statement. Then my mother took the microphone, her socialite smile perfectly in place. We want to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge how proud we are of our true family. In fact, we've recently updated our will and family trust to reflect exactly who our family is. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even those who didn't know me or our situation could sense the strange undercurrent in her words. This was beyond inappropriate for a graduation ceremony, but my parents had always believed rules didn't apply to them when it came to making a point. From my seat, I could see Madison's face. Unlike my parents, she looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. But she remained silent, complicit in her acceptance of their declaration. Trevor, beside my parents, wore an expression of confusion, clearly sensing something off about their statements, but not understanding the full context. The dean, looking slightly bewildered by this unexpected turn, gently reclaimed the microphone with a practiced smile. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Walker, for those personal words. Let's continue with our recognition of all our wonderful families. The ceremony continued, but I barely registered what was happening. 550 people had just witnessed my parents publicly disown me. The hushed whispers around me confirmed that others had picked up on the strange subtext of my parents' speech. A woman 2 seats away leaned toward her companion and whispered, "Did they just disinherit someone at a graduation ceremony?" The humiliation was overwhelming. I had come hoping for reconciliation, or at least civil treatment, and instead had been subjected to a calculated public rejection. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give my parents the satisfaction of breaking me. As the ceremony droned on, a strange calm began to replace my initial shock. The pain was still there, but something else was emerging alongside it. Anger. Not the destructive, blind rage that leads to regrettable actions, but a clear, cold anger that sharpened my focus. And then I remembered the envelope in my purse. With hands that only slightly trembled, I reached for it, suddenly certain that whatever it contained was important. Something about my parents' excessive actions today felt defensive, as if they were not just rejecting me but actively guarding against something. As the university choir began a musical interlude, I quietly slipped out of my row, clutching the mysterious envelope. Whatever it contained, I needed to see it now. The elegant restroom in Harvard's historic Widener Library was empty when I entered, everyone still captivated by the graduation ceremony. I locked myself in the farthest stall, my hands trembling as I finally opened the mysterious envelope. Inside were several documents, neatly organized with paper clips. The first was a single page that made my world stop spinning. It was an adoption certificate with my name on it. Abigail Grace Walker, adopted by Gerald and Diana Walker on April 17, 1997. I was 5 years old when they adopted me, yet I had no memory of this. How is that possible? My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the official document, its government seal mocking the life I thought I had known. The next document was a birth certificate listing my biological mother as Sarah Mitchell. There was no father named. According to this, I had been born in a small town in Pennsylvania, not in Boston as I had always been told. Everything I thought I knew about my origins was a lie. Behind these were medical records showing that Diana Walker had suffered multiple miscarriages before they decided to adopt. Then, surprisingly, she had conceived naturally and given birth to Madison 2 years after my adoption. The miracle child they had given up hoping for. As I flipped through the papers with increasingly shaky hands, fragments of childhood memories began to resurface and reorganize themselves into a new, terrible picture. The way my mother would sometimes look at me with an expression I could never quite identify, now clearly recognizable as resentment. My father's inability to connect with me, his constant emotional distance. The family jokes about how I didn't inherit the Walker business sense or the Walker artistic talent. They weren't jokes. They were acknowledgments of a biological truth they had hidden from me my entire life. But there was more. The next set of documents were bank statements spanning decades, showing regular payments from Gerald Walker's personal account to a trust in the name of Sarah Mitchell. The payments had begun the same month as my adoption and continued until 5 years ago, when they abruptly stopped. Each payment was for $10,000, marked simply as SM Trust. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the next document, a handwritten letter addressed to me. Dear Abigail, it began in feminine handwriting. If you're reading this, I've finally found the courage to share the truth with you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am your biological mother. The letter explained that Sarah had been a junior executive at my father's company 28 years ago. They had had an affair while my mother was struggling with fertility issues. When Sarah became pregnant, Gerald had paid her to keep quiet, arranging for her to leave the company with a generous severance package on the condition that she never reveal the truth about our relationship. When you were born, Sarah wrote, I was young, scared, and alone. Gerald convinced me that giving you to him and Diana would provide you with opportunities one could never offer. In a moment of weakness and fear, I agreed. The adoption was arranged privately through connections, with the condition that I would never contact you. In return, Gerald established a trust for me and made regular payments that allowed me to rebuild my life. The letter continued, explaining that the payments had stopped because Sarah had finally refused to accept them, tired of the guilt they represented. She had been trying to find a way to contact me for years, but Gerald had used his influence to block her attempts. Recently, she had connected with Rachel, my best friend, through social media after seeing us in photos together. It was Rachel who had secretly placed these documents in my purse, knowing I would need the truth. Madison knows everything, Sarah's letter concluded. She discovered the truth when she was 16 and found the original adoption papers. Gerald and Diana swore her to secrecy, reinforcing that revealing this would destroy the family. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your sister, but she has been complicit in this deception for years. I hope someday you can forgive me for my weakness. I have never stopped thinking about you and would welcome a chance to know the woman you've become if you're willing. Love, your mother, Sarah. Attached to the letter was a recent photo of a woman in her 50s with my same green eyes and the dimple in her left cheek that I had always considered my most distinctive feature. The resemblance was undeniable. The final document was a note from Rachel. Abby, I'm sorry for the secrecy, but Sarah found me 3 months ago. After hearing her story and seeing the evidence, I knew you deserved the truth. She's been trying to reach you for years. Your parents' lawyer has been intercepting her letters and calls. Whatever happens at the graduation, know that you have people who truly love you. Call me when you're ready. Love, Rachel. In that bathroom stall, surrounded by cold marble and the weight of decades of lies, everything suddenly made terrible sense. My parents hadn't merely favored Madison. They had resented me as living proof of my father's infidelity, a constant reminder of a mistake they had been forced to incorporate into their perfect lives. When Madison was born, their real daughter, they no longer had to pretend I was anything but an obligation. I wasn't just the less favored child. I was never truly their child at all in their eyes. The systematic erasure from family photos, the cold treatment, the public disowning, it was all part of a gradual process of removing the evidence of their darkest secret. By publicly declaring Madison their only daughter and updating their will, they were completing the process they had begun years ago, erasing me from their family narrative. And Madison, the sister I had never been close to but had never truly resented either, had known the truth since she was 16. She had watched their treatment of me for years with full knowledge of why it was happening and had said nothing. I gathered the documents with hands that had stopped trembling. The shock had been replaced by a strange, cold clarity. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly why my family was the way it was. The mystery that had shaped my entire existence had finally been solved. I checked my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was intact, my expression composed. Only my eyes betrayed the storm within, their green depths reflecting not pain but something new, determination. I had been invited to this graduation for appearance's sake, perhaps as a final farewell before being completely cut out. But now I had the truth, and with it, an unexpected power. I returned to the ceremony with the envelope securely in my hand, my mind racing with what to do next. The truth had set me free in one sense, but it had also handed me an impossible decision. Should I maintain dignity in silence, or should I respond to their public rejection with a public revelation of my own? As I slipped back into my seat, the ceremony was reaching its conclusion. Soon we would move to the reception, where families would celebrate together, where my parents would undoubtedly continue their charade of being a perfect family of three. The decision of what to do next was mine alone. The reception following the graduation was held in one of Harvard's elegant courtyards, where white tents, flower arrangements, and champagne stations created an atmosphere of refined celebration. Families clustered together, taking photos and toasting their graduates' achievements. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, a perfect backdrop for what should have been perfect memories. I stood at the edge of the gathering, watching my parents holding court near the center. Gerald, Diana, and Madison formed a tight triangle of intimacy, champagne flutes in hand as they chatted with the dean and several distinguished-looking guests. Trevor stood slightly apart, checking his phone occasionally, perhaps feeling the outsider he unknowingly was in this family built on secrets. With the envelope of truth clutched in my hand, I straightened my shoulders and walked deliberately toward them. Several people glanced my way, perhaps recognizing me as the woman who had been so publicly excluded earlier. I kept my head high, my pace steady. Diana saw me first, her practiced smile faltering slightly before she recovered. She whispered something to Gerald, whose head snapped up, his expression hardening as he tracked my approach. Madison turned last, her eyes widening with what looked like genuine alarm. "Abigail," my father said when I reached them, his voice pitched low to avoid drawing attention. "I think you've misunderstood the nature of today's invitation. This reception is for family and special guests only." "Family," I repeated, my voice steadier than I had expected. "That's exactly what I want to discuss, Dad. Or should I call you Gerald now?" His face paled slightly. "This is neither the time nor place for whatever scene you're planning to create. If you have concerns, we can arrange a private meeting." "A private meeting," I echoed. "Like the private speech you gave disowning me in front of hundreds of people? Or the private way you've been erasing me from family photos? Or perhaps the private way you updated your will and announced it during a graduation ceremony?" People nearby had begun to notice our tense exchange. The dean looked uncomfortable, glancing between us and clearly sensing conflict. "Security," Gerald said quietly to a staff member hovering nearby. "This woman is causing a disturbance." Before the young man could react, I spoke again, louder this time. "I'd like to speak with my family privately first. If they refuse, then I suppose we'll have to continue the public conversation they started during the ceremony." Diana stepped forward, her social mask firmly in place, but her eyes cold with warning. "Abigail, you're making a spectacle of yourself. You've always been prone to these emotional outbursts. This is exactly why we've had to distance ourselves." "Distance yourselves," I repeated, opening the envelope. "Is that what we're calling it now? Let me show you what I found today." I pulled out the adoption certificate, holding it where only they could see it. Did you think I would never discover the truth? That I would just accept being treated like an unwanted houseguest in my own family forever? The blood drained from Diana's face. Madison looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Gerald was the only one who maintained his composure, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Put that away," he hissed.
"Now. Why?"
I asked, my voice gaining strength. "Are you afraid of what people might think if they knew the truth? That I'm not your biological daughter, but the product of your affair with Sarah Mitchell? That you've been paying her hush money for decades? That Madison has known about this since she was 16 and said nothing while watching you treat me like I was nothing." Trevor stepped closer, his expression confused. Madison, what is she talking about? Madison remained silent, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. The years of complicity in her parents' deception had trapped her in an impossible position, and now she seemed unable to choose a side. Gerald's attempt at control cracked. "You ungrateful little," he began, his voice rising. "We gave you everything. A home, an education, opportunities most children would kill for. And this is how you repay us? By dragging up ancient history to ruin your sister's graduation. Gave me everything?" I laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. "You gave Madison everything. You gave me the bare minimum required by law and emotional neglect that no child deserves. And now I understand why. I was never your daughter in your eyes. I was just evidence of a mistake you had to hide." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a slight distance, pretending not to listen but clearly captivated by the drama unfolding. Diana noticed and made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Abigail has been struggling with some mental health issues," she announced to those nearby, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "We've tried to get her help, but she refuses treatment. This is exactly the kind of delusional episode her doctors warned us about." The casual cruelty of her lies stunned me momentarily. This woman who had raised me was willing to declare me mentally ill to protect her family's reputation. But I was no longer the insecure daughter desperate for their approval. I had evidence, and more importantly, I finally understood my worth wasn't determined by their acceptance. "Open the envelope," I said, handing it to Trevor, who stood closest to me. "See for yourself what kind of family you're marrying into." Trevor hesitated, looking at Madison, who had gone completely pale. Her silence was answer enough. He took the envelope and began examining its contents, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Madison," he questioned, his voice barely audible. "Did you know about this?" Before she could answer, Gerald lunged forward, attempting to grab the envelope from Trevor's hands. "This is private family business," he growled. "Family business," I repeated. "That's right. And like it or not, I am family. Biology doesn't change the fact that you adopted me, raised me, and are legally my parents. You can disown me, disinherit me, and try to erase me, but you can't change the fact that I exist." Diana's composure finally cracked completely. "You were a mistake," she hissed, her voice venomous despite her attempt to keep it down. "A living reminder of his betrayal that I had to look at every single day. Do you have any idea what that was like? Then we had Madison, our real daughter, and every time I looked at you both, I saw the difference between his mistake and our miracle." Her words confirmed everything I had suspected, but hearing them spoken aloud still cut deep. The nearby crowd's hushed gasps made it clear her statement had been overheard. Gerald grabbed Diana's arm, trying to silence her, but she was beyond caring now. 28 years of resentment poured out in a public setting she would normally have considered beneath her dignity. "We gave you our name, our home, paid for your education," she continued. "And you were never grateful, always wanting more, always looking at us with those accusing eyes, so like hers." "Like Sarah's," I supplied. "My biological mother. The woman you've kept me from knowing my entire life." Professor Franklin, who I later learned was Madison's academic advisor, had approached during Diana's outburst. An older woman with kind eyes and an air of authority, she placed herself beside me. "I think," she said firmly, "this conversation needs to move elsewhere. Immediately." Gerald seemed to suddenly remember where we were and who might be watching. His reputation in business circles was built in part on connections to Harvard, and this public scene threatened relationships he had carefully cultivated for decades. "This is a private family matter," he insisted, attempting to regain his dignified facade. "It became a public matter when you chose to make statements during the ceremony," Professor Franklin replied coolly. "And it appears to be causing considerable distress to multiple people here, including one of my students." She gestured toward Madison, who looked on the verge of tears. Trevor was still reading through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. He finally looked up at Madison. "You knew about this? All this time?" Madison nodded almost imperceptibly, unable to speak. And you watch them treat her this way? Your own sister? The disgust in his voice was unmistakable. She's not my sister, Madison finally whispered, then immediately looked like she wanted to take the words back. There it is, I said quietly. The truth, finally spoken aloud. What happened next occurred with such speed it was difficult to process. Gerald, seeing his perfectly constructed life crumbling before his eyes, lost the control he prided himself on. He stepped toward me, his finger jabbing the air inches from my face. You will leave now, he commanded, his voice shaking with rage. You will take these lies and fabrications and get out of our lives permanently. I don't know who put these ideas in your head or forged these documents, but I will not stand here and let you destroy everything we've built. Forged? I echoed in disbelief. You think I forged a government-issued adoption certificate? Birth records? The letter from Sarah you know exists because you've been intercepting them for years? Your own bank statements showing payments to her trust. Something in his expression shifted, a momentary flash of panic that confirmed everything. And in that moment, any remaining doubt I might have harbored vanished completely. My God, Trevor said, stepping away from Madison. It's all true, isn't it? The crowd around us had grown, drawn by the escalating conflict. Gerald and Diana, socialites who had spent their lives managing public perception, were watching their carefully crafted image disintegrate in real time. How dare you? Gerald finally exploded, his voice echoing across the courtyard. After everything we did for you, taking you in when nobody wanted you, giving you our name, and this is how you repay us? By humiliating your mother and ruining your sister's graduation? This is exactly why you were never truly part of this family. You're just like your mother, manipulative and ungrateful. His outburst confirmed everything to everyone within earshot. No denial, just anger at being exposed. Diana began crying, not from remorse, but from humiliation. Madison stood frozen, caught between family loyalty and the evident truth, while Trevor continued to put distance between himself and the family he had nearly joined. Professor Franklin placed a gentle hand on my arm. I think you've said what needed to be said, she murmured. Perhaps it's time to leave with your dignity intact. She was right. There was nothing more to be gained by continuing this painful public spectacle. I had not come seeking revenge, only acknowledgement and truth. Now both had been achieved, albeit in the most painful way possible. I didn't come here to destroy your family, I said quietly to all three walkers. I came hoping to finally be acknowledged as part of it. That was clearly never going to happen. So this is goodbye on my terms, not yours. I turned to leave, my head high despite the tears threatening to fall. As I walked away, I heard Trevor say, I need some time to think, Madison, followed by Diana's anguished, now look what you've done, aimed either at me or Gerald. It wasn't clear which. What was clear was that their perfect family facade had cracked beyond repair. The secret they had kept buried for 28 years was now exposed to the light, and nothing would ever be the same for any of us. As I left Harvard Yard, a strange sense of lightness replaced the heaviness I had carried my entire life. The burden of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it had finally been lifted. The mystery of why I had never been enough had been solved. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like my own to travel. 1 year has passed since that fateful day at Harvard. The seasons have changed, wounds have begun to heal, and life has taken directions I never could have anticipated when I walked into that graduation ceremony clutching at desperate hopes for family reconciliation. The first person I contacted after leaving Harvard was Rachel. She was waiting for my call and immediately offered to fly to Boston, but I needed time alone to process everything. Instead, we talked for hours as I sat in my hotel room, the documents spread before me like puzzle pieces finally assembled into a coherent picture. I'm so sorry I kept it from you, Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. When Sarah found me through Facebook, I didn't know what to do. The evidence was overwhelming, but I was afraid of how it would affect you. You did the right thing, I assured her. If you had told me before the graduation, I might not have gone, and I needed to see the truth for myself. 2 weeks after returning to New York, I contacted Sarah Mitchell. Our first meeting was at a quiet cafe in Manhattan, both of us so nervous we could barely speak at first. She had my eyes, my dimple, my habit of tucking hair behind my ear when thinking. The genetic connection was undeniable and strangely comforting. "I've imagined this moment for 23 years, she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "I've rehearsed explanations and apologies, but now that you're here, they all seem inadequate. Why did you agree to the adoption?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since discovering the truth. Sarah's story emerged slowly. She had been 24, ambitious and new to the corporate world when she met Gerald. The affair was brief, but intense. When she discovered she was pregnant, Gerald had already reconciled with Diana, who had suffered multiple miscarriages in their attempts to start a family. "He convinced me that giving you to them would provide you with opportunities one couldn't," Sarah explained. "I was alone, building a career, barely able to support myself. The financial arrangement gave me security, and I truly believed you would be loved as their daughter." "But you tried to contact me later," I said. Sarah nodded. "When you were about 10, I had established myself professionally and personally. I began to question my decision, especially after seeing a photo of you in a company newsletter. Gerald had kept his promise to provide financially, but when I expressed interest in connecting with you, he became threatening. His lawyers made it clear I would lose everything if I violated our agreement." Over the following months, Sarah and I built a relationship cautiously but steadily. She had never married or had other children, her career as an environmental lawyer becoming her primary focus. Learning about her life, her values, and seeing my own reflection in her mannerisms helped heal parts of me I hadn't even realized were broken. "I don't expect to replace the years of motherhood I missed," she told me during our third meeting. "But I hope we can build something meaningful moving forward." And we have. Our relationship today is unique, neither purely mother-daughter nor simply friendship, but something honest and nurturing that continues to evolve. Meanwhile, my relationship with the Walkers took unexpected turns. 2 months after the graduation, I received a letter from Madison, her first attempt at contact since that day. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "What happened to you is wrong, and my silence made me complicit. I've spent my life accepting the family narrative without questioning it, and I'm only now beginning to understand the damage that caused." We met once, awkwardly, at a restaurant halfway between New York and Boston. The conversation was difficult, years of unspoken truths hanging between us. "I found the adoption papers when I was 16, Madison confirmed. "I was looking for my birth certificate for a passport application and found yours instead. When I confronted them, they swore me to secrecy, saying it would destroy our family if it became public knowledge." "And you agreed," I said, not a question but a statement. "I was 16, raised to believe family loyalty was paramount," she said, not as an excuse, but as explanation. "By the time I was old enough to understand the real impact, the pattern was set. I told myself you were doing fine, had your own life. I convinced myself it wasn't my secret to tell." We parted that day with no promises of sisterhood suddenly rekindled. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be easily rebuilt. But there was a fragile understanding, a recognition that we had both been shaped by circumstances beyond our control. Trevor, surprisingly, reached out to me about 4 months after the graduation. He and Madison had ended their engagement, the revelation of family secrets proving too significant to overlook. "It wasn't just what they did to you," he explained during our brief coffee meeting. "It was witnessing how capable they were of maintaining such a significant deception. It made me question everything about the relationship and the family I thought I was joining." He shared that in the weeks following our confrontation, he had discovered more Walker family secrets, financial irregularities, and ethical compromises that had contributed to their wealth and status. The perfect family had been built on a foundation of carefully maintained illusions. As for Gerald and Diana, their public humiliation had consequences they had never anticipated. Several board members of Gerald's company, concerned about the publicity and ethical implications, called for a review of his leadership. Diana's standing in her social circles, built on perceptions of moral superiority and perfect family values, was irrevocably damaged. I received one letter from Gerald, not an apology, but a final attempt at control. He offered a financial settlement in exchange for my signature on a non-disclosure agreement, attempting to buy my silence, as he had once bought Sarah's. I returned the letter unopened. Diana has never contacted me directly, though I heard through Madison that she suffered what was described as a nervous breakdown in the months following the graduation. The carefully constructed reality she had maintained for decades had shattered, leaving her unable to rebuild her self-image. The most significant healing, however, has happened within myself. With Eleanor's guidance, I've worked through the trauma of discovering my entire childhood was built on deception. The abandonment issues, the constant sense of being unworthy of love, the pattern of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it, all of these could finally be addressed with full understanding of their origins. "You are never the problem, Abigail," Eleanor reminded me during one particularly difficult session. "You are a child placed in an impossible situation, with adults who projected their own issues onto you. The fact that you've emerged as compassionate and self-aware as you are is remarkable." Gradually, I've built what Eleanor calls my chosen family, people who love me for who I am, not what I represent or how I reflect on them. Rachel remains my steadfast friend, her honesty in finally sharing the truth strengthening rather than damaging our bond. Sarah has introduced me to relatives I never knew I had, cousins, and an aunt who welcomed me without reservation. I've also found unexpected strength in my career. The marketing firm where I work recognized my resilience and promoted me to creative director 6 months ago, a position that allows me to shape narratives in a positive, authentic way. The journey has not been easy. There are still days when the pain resurfaces, when I question whether I could have done something differently to earn the love that should have been freely given. But those moments grow less frequent and less intense with time. What I've learned through this experience is that family is not defined solely by blood or legal documents. Family is created through love, respect, and honesty. The people who stand by you when your world falls apart, who see your broken pieces and help you reassemble them into something stronger. These are your true family. I've also learned that the truth, however painful, is ultimately liberating. Living with uncertainty and sensing but not understanding rejection was far more damaging than facing the harsh reality. Knowledge gave me power and choices I never had before. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that our worth is not determined by those who reject us, but by how we choose to live with integrity even when it's difficult. Standing up for myself that day at Harvard was not about revenge, but about finally claiming my right to dignity and truth. If you're watching this and struggling with family rejection or secrets, know that you are not defined by other people's limitations or fears. Your worth is inherent, not earned through others' approval. Building a life on truth may be harder initially than maintaining comfortable illusions, but the freedom it brings is immeasurable. I would love to hear your stories of family revelations and healing in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you viewed your childhood? How did you handle it? Please hit the like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to self-discovery, and remember that sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born or adopted into. I never thought my own brother would be the one to break my heart. But there I was, standing outside a wedding tent that cost more than my first car, holding a paper plate while the rest of my family dined under crystal chandeliers. "We all agreed, you're not in the wedding party," Travis said with an apologetic shrug that didn't reach his eyes. His new father-in-law's laughter cut deeper than any knife. "Real family eats under roofs," he sneered. That was the moment I decided financial ghosts don't bring gifts. Before I get into the whole messy saga, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy stories about family drama and sweet, sweet revenge. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to hear how 38 voicemails and 111 messages later, my brother learned exactly what family loyalty means. My name is Natalie Rivera, and at 35, I've built a successful career as a financial advisor. I drive a sensible car, own a modest condo in the city, and have enough in my retirement accounts to sleep soundly at night. But my life wasn't always this stable. When our parents divorced when Travis was just 7 and I was 16, our family fractured in ways that left permanent scars. My mother, Catherine, moved on quickly, remarrying within a year and starting what she called her real life. My father, Richard, buried himself in work, leaving me to essentially raise my little brother. I became Travis's surrogate mother, making his lunches, helping with homework, attending his parent-teacher conferences when neither of our actual parents bothered to show up. When it came time for college, I had just started my career. I postponed my own master's degree to help pay for Travis's education at a prestigious private university. It's an investment in our family, I told myself as I wrote check after check for his tuition, housing, textbooks, and the spring break trips he couldn't bear to miss while his friends jetted off to Cancun. After graduation, I helped Travis with the down payment on his first house, a charming bungalow that needed work but had potential, as the realtor kept emphasizing. I spent weekends helping him paint, install new flooring, and update the kitchen. Those weekends were some of my favorite memories with him. Pizza on the floor, paint in our hair, laughing about childhood memories. Everything changed when Travis met Vanessa Harrington at the country club where he'd recently secured a membership, another expense I had quietly subsidized, believing it would help him network for his fledgling marketing career. Vanessa came from old money, the kind that doesn't talk about having it because everyone already knows. Her father, Walter Harrington, owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states and made sure everyone knew exactly how self-made he was, despite inheriting the business from his father. The first time Travis brought Vanessa to dinner at my place, I noticed the way her eyes scanned my modest condo, lingering on the IKEA furniture I'd assembled myself. Quaint, she'd said with a thin smile, and I watched my brother flinch slightly, as though her assessment reflected on him too. Over the 18 months they dated, I watched Travis transform. His casual button-downs were replaced with tailored shirts bearing tiny embroidered logos that cost more than my entire outfit. He traded his practical sedan for a German luxury car that strained his budget. He began using words like summer as a verb and dropping names of exclusive resorts I'd never heard of. When Travis called to announce their engagement, I was genuinely happy for him. I'd love to help with the wedding, I offered immediately, knowing how expensive these events could be. That's so sweet, Nat, he'd replied. We'll definitely keep that in mind. In the early days of wedding planning, I was included in some of the conversations. Travis and Vanessa came over one Sunday afternoon with wedding magazines and a preliminary guest list. We drank coffee and circled potential venues, with Vanessa dismissing most of my suggestions as a bit basic. What about the role you'd like me to play? I asked tentatively. I'm happy to help however you need me. Oh, we haven't figured out the wedding party yet, Vanessa had said quickly. It's all still coming together. Travis nodded. Yeah, still early days. But it wasn't early days for long. Gradually, the updates became less frequent. Travis canceled our standing monthly dinners 3 times in a row. When I called to check in on wedding plans, he'd respond with vague assurances that everything was coming along great before rushing off the phone. Then, just 1 week before the wedding, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Thick cream cardstock embossed with gold foil announced the union of Travis Rivera and Vanessa Harrington at Sterling Vineyards, an exclusive venue that I knew charged 5 figures just for the space. There was no mention of the rehearsal dinner, no indication of my role in the ceremony, no personal note from my brother. I called Travis immediately. Just got the invitation, I said when he answered. It's beautiful. Yeah, Vanessa's mom worked with a designer in New York, he replied. I noticed there wasn't any information about the rehearsal or my role in the ceremony. A long pause followed. Listen, Nat, we decided to keep the wedding party really small. Just a couple people on each side. Oh, I said, trying to mask my hurt. That makes sense. But you'll be there for the whole thing, of course. Wouldn't be the same without you. Despite the disappointment, I was determined to be supportive. I arranged time off work, bought a new dress in a dusty blue that I knew would complement the wedding colors without matching the bridal party, and prepared a generous gift. I transferred $8,200 into the Venmo account I still shared with Travis from his college days, money I had been saving for a kitchen renovation, but decided my brother's wedding was more important. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, as though even the weather was conspiring to create Vanessa's dream day. I spent extra time on my hair and makeup, determined to look my best even if I wasn't standing beside my brother. As I drove to Sterling Vineyards, I pushed down the anxiety that had been building all week. Today wasn't about me. It was about Travis, and I would plaster on a smile if it killed me. Sterling Vineyards was even more breathtaking than the photos on their website had suggested. Rows of meticulously maintained grapevines stretched across rolling hills, their leaves catching the late afternoon sunlight. The main building was a Spanish-style villa with terracotta roof tiles and climbing roses framing massive wooden doors. In the distance, I could see a white tent set up for the reception, gossamer fabric billowing gently in the breeze. The parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles, gleaming BMWs, Mercedes, and even a few Bentleys that I assumed belonged to Vanessa's family. I felt suddenly self-conscious about my practical Subaru as I pulled into one of the few remaining spaces near the back of the lot. I smoothed the skirt of my dress as I walked toward the venue. The dusty blue silk fell just below my knees, elegant but not overstated. I'd paired it with nude heels and pearl earrings that had belonged to our grandmother, something old, something borrowed, though I wasn't the bride. My hair was swept into a low chignon, and I carried a small clutch containing the envelope with details of my Venmo gift. As I approached the venue's main entrance, I spotted several of our cousins gathered in a small group. Melissa, who I'd babysat countless times, was now a poised young woman of 23. She wore a formal dress in sage green that I immediately recognized as bridesmaid attire. Beside her stood our cousins Jessica and Amber, similarly dressed. Natalie, Melissa called out, then immediately dropped her gaze when the others turned to look at me. The group quickly dispersed, each suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere. Confused, I continued into the venue's courtyard, where guests were mingling before the ceremony. I scanned the crowd for Travis, but didn't see him among the clusters of well-dressed attendees. What I did see were more sage green dresses and charcoal gray suits than could possibly constitute a small wedding party. Natalie. My mother's voice came from behind me, cool and controlled as always. I turned to find both my parents standing together, an unusual sight since their bitter divorce nearly 20 years ago. My mother, Catherine, looked elegant in a taupe dress, with an elaborate fascinator perched on her perfectly highlighted hair. My father, Richard, stood awkwardly beside her in a dark suit that looked new but slightly too tight around the collar. Mom, Dad, I greeted them, leaning in to kiss my mother's cheek. She turned slightly so my lips barely brushed her skin. You look nice, she said, her eyes flickering over my carefully chosen outfit. I thought the invitations specified formal attire. This is formal, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Well, I suppose it's adequate, she sniffed. My father gave me an apologetic smile. You look beautiful, kiddo, he said, earning a sharp glance from my mother. Have you seen Travis? I asked. I wanted to wish him luck before the ceremony. He's with the groomsmen, my mother replied. Very busy, I imagine. Better not to disturb him. I'm his sister, I said. I'm sure he'd want to see me. My father's eyes darted nervously between us. He's over by the fountain with the other guys, he said quickly. I'm sure a quick hello would be fine. Ignoring my mother's disapproving look, I thanked my father and made my way toward the ornate fountain at the center of the courtyard. Sure enough, Travis stood among a group of 8 men, all dressed in identical charcoal gray suits with sage green ties and pocket squares. 8 groomsmen. So much for a small wedding party. Travis spotted me approaching and froze momentarily before excusing himself from the group. He looked handsome in his groom's attire, though his smile seemed forced as he reached me. Nat. You made it, he said, giving me a quick, awkward hug. Of course I made it. I wouldn't miss my only brother's wedding, I replied, studying his face. You look great, Travis. Really happy. Thanks, yeah, it's been crazy, but everything's coming together. His eyes kept darting back to the groomsmen, as though afraid to be away from them too long. I see you have quite the wedding party, I observed. 8 groomsmen. Travis had the decency to look embarrassed. Yeah, well, you know. Vanessa has a lot of friends, and then there's her brothers and some of my college buddies. And our cousins, I added. I saw Melissa, Jessica, and Amber in bridesmaid dresses. Right, yeah. Vanessa really connected with them at Thanksgiving. And her sister Brielle is the maid of honor, of course. I nodded, waiting for some explanation about my absence from this extensive wedding party, but Travis just shifted uncomfortably from one foot to another. So where should I sit for the ceremony? I asked finally. Front row with family. Actually, Travis began, but was interrupted by the arrival of a tall, silver-haired man with a deep tan and an expensive watch glinting on his wrist. Travis, my boy. We need you for photos before the ceremony, the man boomed, clapping a heavy hand on my brother's shoulder. His eyes landed on me with obvious assessment. And who might this be? Walter, this is my sister, Natalie, Travis said, his voice taking on a deferential tone I'd never heard before. Natalie, this is Walter Harrington, Vanessa's father. The sister, Walter said, as though confirming a rumor. He extended a manicured hand. Pleasure to meet you. Travis has told us, well, something about you. I shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip. Likewise. Congratulations on your daughter's big day. Walter looked me up and down with unconcealed judgment. Financial advisor, aren't you? With one of those small firms downtown. Lancaster and Associates. We manage over $300 million in assets, I replied evenly. Charming, Walter said, clearly unimpressed. Is that a Subaru I spotted you arriving in? Practical choice. Before I could respond, a coordinator in a headset approached. We're ready to begin seating guests for the ceremony, she announced. Guests began moving toward the ceremony area, where rows of white chairs faced an elaborate floral arch. The tent I'd spotted earlier was even more magnificent up close, a massive structure with clear panels allowing views of the vineyard while providing shelter. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and elaborate floral arrangements adorned each table. I moved to join the procession of guests, but an usher in a charcoal suit stepped in front of me. Excuse me, miss, family seating is by escort only. I'm the groom's sister, I explained. The usher looked confused, consulting his list. I don't have you marked for family seating. Let me check with. It's fine, Alex. Travis's voice came from behind me. I've got this. The usher nodded and moved away to direct other guests. I turned to my brother, expecting him to lead me to the front row. Instead, he stood there holding a paper plate with a few appetizers on it. What's going on, Travis? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Travis couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the paper plate in his hands as though it contained the script for what he needed to say. Look, Nat, he began, his voice low. There's been some arrangements made for the seating and everything. Arrangements. I repeated. Vanessa's family is very traditional, very particular about how these things are done. I waited, watching my brother struggle to find words that wouldn't sound as cruel as they were. We all agreed, Travis finally said. looking up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're not in the wedding party." He thrust the paper plate toward me, like an offering to soften the blow. I stared at the plate: 3 stuffed mushrooms, a bruschetta round, and a soggy-looking pastry, unable to process what was happening. "You all agreed?" I finally managed. Walter Harrington appeared beside Travis, his arm draped across my brother's shoulders in a possessive gesture. "It's nothing personal," he said with a smile that suggested it was entirely personal. "The ceremony space is limited, and we had to prioritize immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I'm his only sister." "Blood isn't always the strongest bond," Walter replied smoothly. "Vanessa's friends have been like sisters to her and now to Travis. And of course, his new Harrington family takes precedence today." Travis still hadn't looked at me directly. "There's a nice spot by the oak tree where you can, watch from." Walter chuckled, the sound like gravel underfoot. "Real family eats under roofs," he said, gesturing to the magnificent tent where guests were now being seated. "But we saved you some appetizers." The humiliation burned through me like acid. Nearby guests pretended not to watch the scene unfolding, their curious eyes darting in our direction, before quickly looking away. I recognized some of them: Travis's college friends who had eaten countless meals at my table, relatives who had attended family gatherings in my home when no one else would host. My hands began to shake, and I could feel heat rushing to my face. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall in front of Walter's smug expression or Travis's cowardly avoidance. In that moment, memory after memory flashed through my mind. 16-year-old me making Travis's Halloween costume by hand when our mother was too busy with her new husband. My name as the co-signer on Travis's first apartment lease because his credit wasn't established. The promotion I'd turned down because it required relocation, and Travis still needed me nearby during his senior year. The vacation fund I'd emptied to help Travis when his car broke down the month before graduation. The countless times I'd been there when no one else was. And now I stood holding a paper plate of leftover appetizers, deemed not family enough to sit inside the tent. My free hand moved to my purse, fingers finding the envelope containing the details of my Venmo gift. I pulled it out slowly, feeling a strange calm replace the shock and hurt. "You know what, Travis?" I said quietly. "You're right. I'm not family today." Travis finally looked at me, confusion crossing his features. "What do you mean?" "Of course you're family. This is just about the seating and—" "No," I interrupted, my voice steady. "This is about choices. And you've made yours." I took a step back, still holding the envelope. Walter's eyes fixed on it, his expression shifting from smugness to sudden interest. "Is that your gift?" he asked, nodding toward the envelope. "We have a table set up inside for—" "Financial ghosts don't bring gifts," I said, slipping the envelope back into my purse. "Enjoy your wedding, Travis." I hope it was worth it. I turned to walk away, but Travis grabbed my arm. "Nat, wait, please. Don't leave. We still want you to be part of the day." "Part of what part?" I asked. "The part where I stand outside and watch through the tent flap? Or the part where I eat appetizers off a paper plate while everyone else has the 5-course dinner I know you've planned?" "You're making a scene," Travis hissed, looking around nervously. "No. You made the scene when you decided your only sister wasn't good enough for your wedding party, but our cousins who you see once a year were perfect fits." Walter stepped forward, his demeanor suddenly conciliatory. "Now, Natalie, let's not be hasty. Family disagreements happen, but today is about celebration. Why don't you come inside? We can find you a seat." His abrupt change in tone told me everything I needed to know. The envelope in my purse had transformed me from an embarrassing relation to a potential source of wedding gifts. "I'm leaving," I said firmly, removing Travis's hand from my arm. "Congratulations on your new family." I walked away with as much dignity as I could muster, keeping my spine straight and my pace measured until I rounded the corner of the main building. Only then did I allow my shoulders to slump and my breath to come in ragged gasps. Finding a secluded bench partially hidden by a large topiary, I sank down and placed the untouched paper plate beside me. My hands were still trembling, adrenaline coursing through my body. How had it come to this? The question echoed in my mind as I stared unseeing at the manicured grounds of Sterling Vineyards. I had given Travis everything: time, money, emotional support, and in return, he had given me a paper plate and permission to watch his wedding from a distance. The financial aspect suddenly hit me full force. Over the years, I had poured thousands into Travis's life. $78,000 for his college tuition and expenses, $12,000 toward his car when he graduated, $35,000 for the down payment on his house. Countless smaller amounts for bills when he was a little short this month. The country club membership initiation fee of $15,000 that I had covered as a career investment. And most recently, the $8,200 I had transferred to our shared Venmo account for his wedding gift. The account we had set up during his freshman year of college so I could easily send him money for books and emergencies. The account I had never removed myself from because there was always another financial need around the corner. I pulled out my phone and opened the Venmo app, navigating to the shared account. There it was, $8,200 sitting in the balance, money I had transferred just yesterday in anticipation of giving it as a wedding gift. My finger hovered over the screen. Would taking it back make me as bad as them? Was I being petty? Vindictive? But then Walter's sneering face appeared in my mind. Real family eats under roofs. And Travis, unable to even look me in the eye while handing me that pathetic paper plate. Natalie. Travis's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up to see him hurrying toward me, panic evident on his face. You can't leave. I stood quickly, phone still in hand. Watch me. Please, he begged, reaching me and grabbing both my arms. It's my wedding day. I need you here. You need me or you need my gift? I asked pointedly. His eyes flickered with guilt. That's not fair. Of course I want you here. You're my sister. Your sister who wasn't good enough to stand with you or even sit with the family. It's complicated, Travis said, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. Vanessa's family has expectations, traditions. They're covering most of the wedding costs and... So you sold me out for a fancy wedding? The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. No. It's not like that. It's just politics. Family politics. Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared, her white gown billowing around her as she strode toward us. Her face was a mask of barely controlled anger. Travis, what are you doing? The photographer is waiting, and you're out here. Her voice trailed off as she noticed me. Oh! Hello, Natalie. Congratulations, I said flatly. Thank you, she replied with equal coolness. Travis, we really need to get back. Natalie's thinking of leaving, Travis told her, his voice tight with anxiety. Vanessa's expression shifted instantly, a practiced smile appearing on her face. Oh, you can't leave. It's our special day. We want all our family here. Do you? I asked. Because it seems like I'm family when it's convenient and not family when it interferes with appearances. That's not true, Vanessa insisted, though her eyes darted nervously toward the tent where guests were still being seated. There was just limited space in the wedding party, and tough decisions had to be made. 8 bridesmaids and 8 groomsmen doesn't sound like limited space to me. Walter appeared behind his daughter, his face flushed from either exertion or anger. What's the holdup here? The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. Natalie's upset about the seating arrangements, Vanessa explained quickly. Walter's eyes narrowed, then he too adopted a conciliatory tone. Listen, Natalie, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Family is important to the Harringtons. We value loyalty and togetherness. Is that why you said real family eats under roofs while handing me a paper plate? I asked. Walter had the grace to look embarrassed. A poor joke, poorly timed. I apologize if it offended you. I noted the careful if in his apology, not acknowledging that his words were objectively offensive, only that I might have taken offense. Why don't we all take a breath? Walter continued, glancing at his watch. Natalie, I understand you brought a gift? His eyes dropped to my purse where the envelope had disappeared. And there it was, the real reason for the sudden attempt at reconciliation. They had spotted the envelope and assumed it contained a check. In their minds, I had transformed from an embarrassing relation to a potential contributor to the wedding coffers. I'm reconsidering my gift, I said honestly. Panic flashed across Travis's face. Nat, come on. Don't be like that. Like what? Like someone who expects to be treated with basic respect by her own brother. Please, Travis lowered his voice. I'm counting on your gift for some of the vendor payments. We can talk about this tomorrow, but today, just, please stay and act like everything's fine. The admission stunned me. He had been counting on my money to pay vendors at his own wedding? Without even telling me? I need to freshen up, I said suddenly, needing space to think. Give me a few minutes. Relief washed over Travis's face. Of course. Take your time. The ceremony doesn't start for 15 minutes. I'll be there, I promised, not specifying where there might be. Travis nodded eagerly and allowed Vanessa to pull him back toward the wedding tent. Walter lingered a moment longer, his eyes calculating. Family disagreements happen, he said smoothly. But at the end of the day, blood is thicker than water. With a final appraising look, he turned and followed his daughter. I watched them go, then walked quickly toward the parking lot. In my car, I sat with the air conditioning running, staring at the Venmo app still open on my phone. Travis had admitted he was counting on my gift to pay vendors for a wedding where I wasn't even considered family enough to sit inside the tent. My finger hovered over the transfer button. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to take back my gift and leave my brother's wedding? The image of Travis handing me that paper plate flashed again in my mind. We all agreed. You're not in the wedding party. All of them sitting around, discussing me, deciding I wasn't worthy of standing beside my own brother on his wedding day. Decision made. I pressed the button and transferred the entire $8,200 back to my personal account. A mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, guilt, satisfaction, grief. I had never denied Travis anything he asked for. Until today. As I put my car in reverse, my phone began to ring. Travis's face appeared on the screen. I silenced it and drove away from Sterling Vineyards, away from the paper plate and the tent with its crystal chandeliers, away from the brother who had chosen status over the sister who had given him everything. By the time I arrived home that evening, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. The kind of tiredness that comes not just from physical exertion, but from emotional devastation. I kicked off my heels in the entryway of my condo and padded to the kitchen in bare feet, not bothering to turn on lights as I went. My phone, which I had silenced after the third call from Travis, now showed 15 missed calls and dozens of text messages. I placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at the notification screen as it lit up with yet another incoming call. Travis again. I declined the call and opened the text messages instead. Travis, 4:17 p.m., where are you? Ceremony starting soon. Travis, 4:35 p.m., Natalie, answer your phone. Travis, 4:42 p.m., you can't just leave like this. It's my wedding day. Travis, 5:03 p.m., the caterer is asking for the final payment. I told them it was coming. Please call me. Travis, 5:15 p.m., did you take the money out of Venmo? Travis, 5:16 p.m. Natalie, this isn't funny. Travis, 5:23 p.m., Walter is furious. The venue is threatening to stop service if we don't pay the balance. The messages continued in this vein, growing increasingly desperate. I closed the text app, unable to read anymore. Opening a bottle of Merlot I'd been saving for a special occasion, I poured a generous glass and took a long sip. A knock at my door startled me. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but the knocking persisted. I peered through the peephole to see Monica Peterson, my best friend since college, holding a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. I opened the door and Monica took one look at my face before pulling me into a tight hug. "You look like hell," she said when she finally released me. "Thanks. Just the compliment a girl needs after being rejected by her own family." Monica pushed past me into the apartment, heading straight for the kitchen. "I brought drunken noodles and spring rolls. And I see you've already started on the wine. Good call." She busied herself finding plates and forks while I sank onto a bar stool at my kitchen island. "How did you know?" I asked. "Travis called me," Monica admitted, not meeting my eyes. "He was frantic, said you'd left the wedding and weren't answering your phone. He thought you might be with me." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I hadn't heard from you, but would check on you." She placed a plate of noodles in front of me. "I didn't say I'd report back." I smiled weakly. "Thanks." "So," Monica said, opening her own container of pad thai, "want to tell me what happened?" The whole story poured out of me, the last-minute invitation, the paper plate, Walter's sneering comment about real family, and finally, my decision to take back the money and leave. "Wait," Monica interrupted, her fork suspended midair. "You took back $8,000 from his Venmo?" I nodded, shame and vindication warring within me. "I did." To my surprise, Monica burst out laughing. "That's the most badass thing I've ever heard. Financial ghosts don't bring gifts. Natalie, you're my hero." "I don't feel like a hero," I admitted. "I feel like a bitter, vindictive person." Monica's expression sobered. "Let me ask you something. When you were putting yourself through school while paying for Travis's education, did he ever once offer to take smaller loans so it wouldn't be such a burden on you?" I shook my head. "When you postponed your master's degree to help him with his house down payment, did he suggest you prioritize your education first?" "No, but..." "When you signed as guarantor on his car loan, did he make every payment on time, or did you have to cover some months?" I stared at my noodles. "I covered some months." "Some." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Most," I admitted. "But he was just starting his career, and you were just starting yours when you paid for his college," Monica finished. "Nat, you've been carrying Travis financially and emotionally for your entire adult life. You sacrificed your own opportunities to give him his. And how did he repay you?" "By serving you appetizers on a paper plate outside his wedding tent." Put so bluntly, it was hard to argue with her assessment. Our mom says I'm being selfish and dramatic. Catherine also abandoned both her children emotionally after the divorce, so forgive me if I don't consider her the authority on healthy family dynamics. I took another sip of wine. I just keep thinking about all those people at the wedding who saw what happened. All those relatives who know I raised Travis when our parents checked out. They watched him exclude me and said nothing. "Because they're cowards," Monica said firmly. "Just like Travis." It was easier to go along with Vanessa's family's wishes than to stand up for what's right. A fresh wave of emotion hit me, and I felt tears begin to fall. "I've always been there for him, Monica. Always. Since he was 7 years old and crying because mom didn't come to his school play. I was the one who showed up. Every single time." Monica came around the island and wrapped her arms around me. "I know, sweetie. You've been the only real parent he's had." Then why wasn't I good enough to stand beside him today? The question broke from me in a sob. "Because Travis is weak," Monica said simply. "He spent his life taking the path of least resistance. It was easier to take your help than to stand on his own. And today, it was easier to please Vanessa's family than to honor the sister who has always been there for him." As I cried on Monica's shoulder, the full weight of years of one-sided giving crashed down on me. I had never set boundaries with Travis because I felt responsible for him. I had been 16 when our family fell apart, old enough to understand that none of it was Travis's fault. He had been a child, innocent, and confused. So I had stepped in, determined that he wouldn't suffer for our parents' failures. But somewhere along the way, Giving to Travis had become my identity. His needs always came first. His dreams took priority. His happiness was paramount. I had shrunk my own life to expand his. What do I do now? I asked finally, wiping my eyes. Monica handed me a napkin. Now you set boundaries. Real ones. You stop being Travis's personal ATM and emotional support animal. You focus on your own life for once. And tonight? He's still calling. Tonight you turn off your phone and get some sleep. Tomorrow will be soon enough to deal with the fallout. I nodded, suddenly exhausted beyond words. Will you stay? I don't want to be alone. Already planned on it, Monica said, refilling our wine glasses. I brought overnight stuff in the car, and ice cream for later. For the first time since receiving that wedding invitation a week ago, I felt a small measure of peace. Monica helped me change into comfortable clothes, and we spent the evening watching mindless reality TV, the sound of my phone's notifications eventually fading as I followed her advice and turned it off completely. That night, as I drifted off to sleep on my couch with Monica snoring softly in the armchair beside me, I made a promise to myself. No more putting Travis's needs before my own. No more sacrificing my dreams for his. Tomorrow would bring a reckoning, but tonight, I would rest. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the blinds I'd forgotten to close. For a blissful moment, I existed in the space between sleep and wakefulness, untouched by yesterday's events. Then reality crashed back, and I remembered everything. The paper plate, Walter's sneering comment, my dramatic exit, the Venmo transfer. Monica was already awake, the smell of coffee drifting from my kitchen. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my tangled hair. Sleeping Beauty awakens, Monica said, bringing me a steaming mug. How are you feeling? Like I burned down my family tree and now have to live with the ashes, I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Poetic, but dramatic. Monica sat beside me, her own mug cradled in her hands. Ready to face the music? I took a fortifying sip of coffee. As I'll ever be. Monica handed me my phone, which she had apparently plugged into charge overnight. Brace yourself. It's not pretty. I pressed the power button and waited as the device came to life. Notifications immediately began flooding the screen. 38 voicemails. 111 text messages. 27 missed calls. Dozens of app notifications, including multiple Venmo requests from Travis. Holy shit, I breathed. Told you, Monica said grimly. Want me to screen them for you? I shook my head. No, I should do this myself. I started with the voicemails, putting the phone on speaker so Monica could hear too. Travis, 4:52 p.m., Natalie, where are you? The ceremony's about to start, and you're not here. Call me back. Travis, 5:20 p.m., I can't believe you just left. And what happened to the money in Venmo? The caterer is waiting for payment. Call me now. Travis, 5:45 p.m., this is so messed up, Nat. It's my wedding day and you're pulling this childish stunt because you didn't get to be a bridesmaid? Grow up. The messages grew increasingly desperate as the evening progressed. Travis, 7:13 p.m. Vanessa's dad had to put the rest of the reception on his credit card. He's furious. You've embarrassed me in front of my new family. How could you do this to me? Travis, 8:38 p.m., please Nat. Just call me back. We can work this out. Travis, 10:22 p.m., I've been trying to call you all night. The reception was a disaster. Half the vendors threatened to walk out when their final payments didn't come through. Vanessa won't stop crying. Her parents think I'm some kind of con artist. Please call me. There were also messages from other family members. Catherine, 6:05 p.m., Natalie Elizabeth Rivera, what do you think you're doing? Your brother is beside himself. This behavior is absolutely unacceptable. Call me immediately. Melissa, 7:22 p.m., hey Natalie, it's your cousin Melissa. Just checking if you're okay? Travis seems really upset, and I heard something about you leaving the wedding. Let me know if you need anything. Aunt Patricia, 8:40 p.m. Natalie, it's Aunt Patty. I saw what happened with the seating arrangement today. That wasn't right, how they treated you. Just wanted you to know not everyone agrees with how things were handled. Love you, sweetie. But the most surprising message came from Walter Harrington himself. Walter, 11:15 p.m. Natalie, this is Walter Harrington. Your behavior today was absolutely reprehensible. Leaving your brother's wedding and withdrawing funds that were promised for vendor payments? I have a mind to pursue legal action for the embarrassment and financial damage you've caused. I expect to hear from you first thing tomorrow morning with a plan to make this right. By the time we reached the end of the voicemails, I was shaking, partly with anger, partly with a creeping sense of doubt. Had I gone too far? Don't you dare second-guess yourself, Monica said, reading my expression perfectly. They treated you like garbage, and Travis admitted he was counting on your money without even telling you. But what if I ruined his wedding? You didn't ruin anything. His choices ruined his wedding. All you did was refuse to bail him out of those choices. I was about to respond when another knock sounded at my door. Monica and I exchanged glances. If that's Travis, I'm not ready, I whispered. Monica peeked through the peephole, then turned to me with surprise. It's your dad. I hadn't expected that. My father, Richard, had always been the more distant parent, burying himself in work after the divorce. We maintained a polite but somewhat detached relationship, exchanging birthday cards and occasional lunches, but rarely discussing anything of substance. I nodded to Monica, who opened the door. Richard stood there looking uncomfortable in the same suit from yesterday, though considerably more rumpled. He held a bakery bag in one hand. Natalie, he said, his voice rough. Can I come in? I gestured him inside, suddenly conscious of my disheveled appearance. Dad, this is a surprise. I brought bagels, he said awkwardly, holding up the bag. I remember you like the everything ones with scallion cream cheese. The fact that he remembered this small detail about me was more touching than it should have been. Thanks. This is my friend Monica. We've met, Richard said, nodding at Monica. At your college graduation, I think. Good memory, Monica said, taking the bakery bag from him. I'll make more coffee. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me alone with my father. He sat on the edge of my armchair, looking out of place in my living room. So, I began, unsure what to say. Did Travis send you? Richard shook his head. No one sent me. I came because I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine, I said automatically. No, you're not. My father's directness surprised me. What happened yesterday was wrong, Natalie. The way they treated you. I should have said something. The admission hung in the air between us. Why didn't you? I finally asked. Richard sighed heavily, running a hand over his thinning hair. Because I'm a coward. I've always been a coward when it comes to standing up to your mother or making waves. After the divorce, it was easier to step back than to fight for my place in your lives. Travis needed you, I said, old hurts rising to the surface. I needed you. I know, he acknowledged. And I failed you both. But you stepped up, Natalie. You became the parent neither of us was brave enough to be. His words caught me off guard. I had never expected this level of self-awareness from my father. They seated me at the back of the tent. Richard continued. Did you know that? Not with family, not near the wedding party. At a table with some of Vanessa's distant relatives who kept asking if I was the caterer. Despite everything, I felt a laugh bubble up. Seriously? Seriously, Catherine was at the family table with Walter and his wife. Apparently, she and Martha Harrington have become great friends through the wedding planning. They're planning a cruise together next month. The absurdity of it all struck me suddenly. My mother, who had abandoned her children emotionally after the divorce, was now being embraced by Travis's new family, while I, who had sacrificed everything for him, was literally left out in the cold. Did Travis ever tell you I was helping pay for the wedding? I asked. Richard's expression darkened. No. But I'm not surprised. You've always been his safety net, Natalie. We all know it, even if we don't talk about it. I took back my gift, I admitted. $8,000 I had put in our shared Venmo account. I transferred it back to my account and left. Instead of the judgment I had expected, my father nodded slowly. Good for you. Good for me? Dad, Travis left me a dozen voicemails saying the reception was a disaster because vendors didn't get paid. Walter Harrington is threatening legal action. Walter Harrington is full of hot air, Richard said dismissively. He has the money to cover those bills 10 times over. He's just angry that his perfect wedding spectacle had a few hiccups. As though summoned by our discussion, my phone rang with Vanessa's name on the screen. I showed it to my father. Don't answer, he advised. Nothing good will come from talking to her while emotions are still raw. I declined the call, but seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. Curiosity got the better of me, and I played it on speaker. Vanessa's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Natalie, how dare you? How dare you embarrass us like this? Do you have any idea what you've done? The caterer almost walked out in the middle of dinner. The photographer is withholding our photos until the balance is paid. My father had to scramble to cover thousands in unexpected costs. Travis told me you were difficult, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. You've ruined the most important day of our lives because of your petty jealousy. You will be hearing from our lawyer. The message ended, and silence filled my living room. Difficult? I repeated, the word feeling like a slap. That's how Travis describes me to her? Difficult? Richard's expression was grim. You deserve better, Natalie. From all of us, but especially from Travis. Monica returned with coffee and distributed the bagels. So what's the game plan? She asked, settling beside me on the couch. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to call Travis and apologize for the timing, even if I don't regret taking my money back. Another part wants to change my phone number and move to another state. For what it's worth, Richard said carefully, I think you should take some time before making any decisions. Let the dust settle. Your father's right, Monica agreed. Let Travis stew for a bit. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. I nodded, taking a bite of my bagel. As I chewed, a text message arrived from my mother. Catherine, 9:17 a.m. We need to talk. Meet me at Café Laurent at noon. Don't make me come find you. I showed the message to the others. You don't have to go, Richard said immediately. I know, I replied. But I think I should. Get it over with. Want me to come with you? Monica offered. I considered it, then shook my head. No, this is something I need to do alone. But thank you. As my father and Monica helped me clean up from breakfast, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For the first time in my adult life, I had put myself first. My dignity, my self-respect, my financial well-being. It didn't feel as selfish as I had feared. It felt necessary. I decided to respond to just one message before meeting my mother, a simple text to my cousin Melissa. I'm okay. Thank you for checking on me. We'll talk soon. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Café Laurent was busy with the Sunday brunch crowd when I arrived at precisely noon. I spotted my mother immediately. Catherine Rivera-Whitman sat ramrod straight at a corner table, her highlighted bob perfectly in place, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head despite the cloudy day. I steeled myself and approached the table. Hello, Mom. Catherine looked up, her lips pursed in disapproval. You're on time. At least that's something. I slid into the seat across from her, declining to take the bait. A server appeared immediately. Just a black coffee, please, I requested before Catherine could order for me, one of her controlling habits I'd grown to detest. Once the server departed, my mother wasted no time. Do you have any idea what you've done? I believe I declined to be treated like a second-class citizen at my brother's wedding, I replied evenly. You embarrassed the entire family, Catherine hissed, leaning forward. Vanessa's parents had to cover thousands in vendor payments at the last minute. The cake wasn't fully paid for. The band threatened to leave. And this is my problem because Catherine's eyes widened at my calm defiance. Because Travis was counting on your gift to cover those expenses. Funny, he never mentioned that to me. He just mentioned that we all agreed I wasn't good enough to be in the wedding party or even sit with family. Don't be so dramatic, Natalie. The wedding party was Vanessa's decision, and they needed to balance numbers. 8 bridesmaids and 8 groomsmen, I pointed out. Including cousins I see once a year at most. That doesn't sound like balancing numbers to me. The server returned with my coffee, momentarily pausing our conversation. After she left, Catherine's tone softened slightly. Look, I understand you had your feelings hurt. But to leave in the middle of the wedding and withdraw money Travis was counting on? That was childish and vindictive. I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to control my response. Did you know I wasn't in the wedding party before yesterday? Catherine's slight hesitation told me everything. We discussed it when the planning began, she admitted. Vanessa felt it would be awkward. Awkward. I repeated. Why? Well, you know. Catherine gestured vaguely. You're older, you're single, you have your career. You don't exactly fit with the aesthetic they were going for. Each word was a fresh cut. The aesthetic, I echoed. I see. And when exactly were you planning to tell me I didn't meet the wedding's aesthetic requirements? Because I found out yesterday when Travis handed me a paper plate and told me to eat outside. Catherine had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was unfortunate. Walter sometimes speaks without thinking. And Travis? Does he speak without thinking too? Or does he just not think about me at all anymore? Travis has been under enormous pressure, Catherine defended. The Harringtons have expectations. Vanessa comes from a certain social circle. A circle I'm not good enough for, I finished. Despite the fact that I paid for Travis's education, helped with his house down payment, and have been supporting him financially for years. And that's exactly the problem, Catherine exclaimed, then immediately lowered her voice when nearby diners glanced our way. You've always held that over Travis's head. Your financial support. As if being his sister entitles you to control his life. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. Control his life? When have I ever controlled his life? I've done nothing but support his choices, even when they were terrible ones. Like Vanessa? Catherine asked shrewdly. I didn't deny it. She's changed him, Mom. And not for the better. She's elevated him, Catherine countered. The Harringtons are introducing him to people who can actually help his career, not just subsidize it. The implication stung. So I'm good enough to pay his bills, but not good enough to stand beside him at his wedding. Natalie, Catherine sighed, as though explaining to a child, sometimes we have to accept that relationships evolve. Travis is building his own life now with Vanessa. That naturally means some relationships will become less central. Less central? Mom, he wouldn't even let me sit with the family. Because you've been smothering him. Catherine's composure finally cracked. Always checking in, always offering money, always reminding him of what you've sacrificed. Did it ever occur to you that maybe Travis wanted some independence? Independence. I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when he asks me to cover his car payment because he spent his money on a weekend trip to Aspen with Vanessa? Or when he borrowed $3,000 last Christmas for her gift that he never paid back? Catherine waved a dismissive hand. That's different. That's just family helping family. Exactly. Family. The thing I apparently wasn't yesterday. A tense silence fell between us. Catherine took a delicate sip of her tea before speaking again, her voice carefully modulated. Travis and Vanessa are in financial trouble, she admitted finally. The wedding was more expensive than they planned. Walter promised to help but pulled back at the last minute, saying Travis needed to man up and handle it himself. So Travis decided I would cover the difference without even telling me? He was embarrassed, Catherine said, as if that explained everything. And he knew you would help. You always do. Not anymore, I said firmly. That chapter is closed. Catherine's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I'm done being Travis's personal ATM. I'm done sacrificing my needs for his. I'm done being the family ghost, present when bills need paying but invisible when recognition or respect is being distributed. You're being petty. No, Mom. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being self-respecting. Catherine leaned forward, her expression suddenly calculating. Travis and Vanessa need help getting back on their feet after this wedding fiasco. Just a small loan to cover the remaining vendor payments and the first few months of married life. 10,000 should do it. I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you serious right now? After everything that happened yesterday, you're here to ask me for more money. It's not for me, Catherine clarified, as though that made it better. It's for your brother. Your only sibling. The answer is no. Natalie, be reasonable. Family supports family. Funny how that principle only works in one direction in this family. Catherine's expression hardened. I didn't want to have to say this, but if you don't help Travis now, you can forget about being part of this family going forward. No holidays, no birthdays, no family gatherings. You'll be completely cut off. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. A year ago, even a week ago, it would have devastated me. Now it felt almost liberating. Mom, I said quietly, I was cut off yesterday when Travis handed me that paper plate. You're just making official what was already clear. You can't mean that. I do. I reached for my purse and placed a $10 bill on the table for my coffee. I love Travis. I always will. But I'm done enabling him, and I'm done letting this family treat me like an ATM with no feelings. I stood to leave, but Catherine grabbed my wrist. Natalie, don't do this. Don't throw away your family over one bad day. It wasn't just one day, Mom. It was a pattern. Yesterday was just when I finally saw it clearly. I gently removed her hand from my wrist and walked away, ignoring her calling my name. Outside the cafe, I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Travis's name appeared on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I declined the call. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, but soon I would be. And when that conversation happened, it would be on my terms, not his. 1 week later, I sat in another cafe, this one closer to my office, watching the door. I'd finally agreed to meet with Travis after days of ignored calls and messages. He'd sounded different on the phone when I finally answered, subdued, even humble. No demands, no accusations, just a simple request to talk. Travis arrived 5 minutes early, another change from his usual 15 minutes late. He looked tired, the designer clothes replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. He spotted me and walked over, hesitating before taking the seat across from me. Thanks for meeting me, he said quietly. I nodded but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Natalie, I don't even know where to start. Travis ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from childhood. I messed up. Badly. Yes, you did. The wedding was a disaster after you left, he admitted. The vendors started demanding their final payments, and when I couldn't produce them, things got ugly. The photographers stopped taking pictures. The band played 1 hour instead of 3. The caterer removed half the dinner options from the menu. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I'm sorry your day was ruined, Travis. I truly am. No, he said firmly, meeting my eyes. Don't apologize. That's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because I want you to know what happened after. After the wedding fell apart, I looked to Walter for help. He'd promised to take care of anything that came up. But when I approached him about covering the vendor balances, he refused. I couldn't hide my surprise. Travis nodded grimly, said it was my responsibility to manage my finances, that his daughter deserved a husband who could handle his business affairs. Then he gave me a lecture about fiscal responsibility in front of the entire wedding party. That must have been humiliating, I acknowledged. It was. But it was also clarifying. Travis looked down at his hands. I realized in that moment that I'd been played. Walter never intended to help with those costs. He knew I was counting on your gift and deliberately engineered the situation with the seating and the wedding party to create conflict. Why would he do that? Because Vanessa told him how often you've helped me financially. He saw you as competition for influence over me. Travis's voice was laced with shame. And I let him manipulate me because I was so desperate to impress him, to feel like I belonged in their world. I took a sip of my latte, processing his words. And Vanessa? Where does she stand in all this? Travis's expression grew pained. That's another thing I've realized this week. Vanessa doesn't love me, at least not the real me. She loves the version of me that her father approved of, the Travis who drives the right car, wears the right clothes, belongs to the right clubs. When everything fell apart at the wedding, when her father publicly humiliated me, she sided with him. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Don't be. It forced me to see what I've been blind to for 2 years. Travis reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. And it forced me to see how I've treated the one person who has always been there for me. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. It hurt, Travis. Being excluded from your wedding party was painful enough, but being treated like I wasn't even family? Being handed a paper plate and told to eat outside? That broke my heart. I know, Travis whispered, his own eyes glistening. And there's no excuse. None. I got caught up in what the Harringtons wanted, in appearing good enough for them, and I betrayed the most important relationship in my life. Why didn't you just tell me you needed help with the wedding costs? I asked. You know I would have helped if you'd asked directly. Because I was ashamed, Travis admitted. I'd already borrowed so much from you over the years. And then Walter started making comments about how a real man wouldn't keep taking handouts from his sister. How I needed to stand on my own. It got in my head. So instead of asking, you just expected the money would be there? Travis nodded miserably. I've been taking you for granted for so long that it didn't even occur to me you might say no. Or that you might be hurt enough by my actions to withdraw your support. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of imbalanced giving between us. What happens now? I finally asked. With you and Vanessa? We're separating, Travis said simply. The wedding night was spent in separate rooms. She's staying with her parents while I figure things out. I'm sorry, I said again. I'm not really. It was a mistake, Nat. A mistake driven by insecurity and the desire to belong to a world that was never real in the first place. I studied my brother's face, seeing for the first time in years the boy I had raised, not the stranger he had become. And what about us? Where do we go from here? Travis took a deep breath. That's entirely up to you. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted nothing to do with me after how I treated you. But I'm hoping we can rebuild. Differently this time. Differently how? No more financial dependence, Travis said firmly. I've taken a second job to pay off the wedding debts and build some savings. I'm selling the luxury car and going back to something more practical. I've canceled the country club membership. I raised an eyebrow. Cold turkey on the Harrington lifestyle? A small smile touched Travis's lips. It wasn't making me happy anyway. Just making me broke and anxious. And Mom? Have you talked to her? Travis's expression darkened. She's still pushing me to reconcile with Vanessa. Says I'm throwing away a golden opportunity by walking away from the Harrington connection. Sounds like Mom. I told her I was meeting you today and she said. Travis hesitated. What? What did she say? She said not to come crawling back to you for money. That I should have more pride. I laughed, surprising both of us. Classic Catherine. I'm not here for money, Nat, Travis said earnestly. I swear. I'm here because you're my sister, and I love you, and I treated you terribly. I want to make it right if that's even possible. I considered his words, searching his face for sincerity. It won't be easy, I said finally. Trust is easier to break than to rebuild. I know, but I'm willing to try for however long it takes. I nodded slowly. Okay, we can try. Relief washed over Travis's features. Thank you, he whispered. But things have to be different, I continued. Real boundaries. Real independence for you. No more enabling from me. Agreed, Travis said quickly. Completely agreed. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't in years. About his job prospects, about my career goals, about the family dynamics that had shaped us both. When we finally parted, there was a tentative peace between us, fragile but real. 3 months later, Travis and I met again, this time for coffee near his new apartment, a modest one-bedroom he could actually afford on his own. In the intervening months, he had followed through on his promises. He got a second job bartending on weekends. He sold the luxury car and bought a used Honda. He initiated the divorce proceedings with Vanessa, who had already begun dating the son of one of her father's business associates. How's the new financial advisor working out? I asked as we settled at a corner table. After our first meeting, I had referred Travis to a colleague who specialized in debt management and financial recovery. It was the only assistance I had offered, a referral, not money. Angela's great, Travis said. Tough but fair. We've got a plan to be debt-free in 18 months if I stick to the budget. And are you sticking to it? Travis smiled. Haven't eaten out in 2 months except for coffee with you. Packed lunch every day. Cancelled all the streaming services except one. It's actually not as hard as I thought it would be. I'm proud of you, I said and meant it. Thanks. But I'm just doing what you've been doing all along, being responsible, living within my means. Better late than never, I teased gently. Travis's expression grew serious. Nat, I don't think I ever properly thanked you. Not just for all the financial help over the years, but for everything. For being there when Mom and Dad weren't. For showing up to every school event, every game. For believing in me even when I didn't deserve it. You deserved it, I said softly. You were a kid who needed support. You still deserved better than what happened at the wedding, but you always deserved to be supported and loved. Well, I'm trying to be worthy of that support now. Our conversation turned to other topics. My recent promotion at work, his tentative steps back into dating, a funny story about our father's new hobby of birdwatching. It felt natural, equal. No longer a conversation between benefactor and dependent, but between siblings who respected each other. As for me, the past 3 months had brought changes of my own. I had finally scheduled classes to complete my long-deferred master's degree. I had started dating Julian, a kind architect I met at a friend's dinner party. And I had established clear boundaries with my mother, who was slowly coming to terms with the new family dynamic whether she liked it or not. When Travis and I parted that day, I felt a sense of closure on the painful wedding incident. The paper plate, the cruel words, the financial manipulation, they had been a catalyst for necessary change. Sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to break unhealthy patterns established over decades. Financial ghosts don't bring gifts, but sometimes, if you're lucky, they bring something more valuable, the courage to demand respect and the wisdom to know when giving becomes enabling. Travis had learned that family isn't about financial transactions, but about mutual respect and support. And I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. So, what about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? Or have you been in Travis's position, suddenly realizing you've been depending too much on someone's generosity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life family dramas with lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family is defined by respect, not by blood or money.